Hello, puppies and kittens. Welcome to another Blasphemers Bible. We're going to be doing double sessions for most of the summer when we can, so that we can pick up the pace on this thing a little bit. We have the assembled troop. Mighty Chicken has managed to join us again. Isaac and Tomer and Lilith and Lawrence, and we might get Kip Davis popping in and out. He said he might try to join us today. So, and I forgot to mention P-Town. I'm sorry. Anyway, anybody have any opening comments? Isaac, you were talking about something before we started recording. I'd like to hear. I think everybody else should hear that too.
Yeah. So in the previous episode, we went over some verses about the value of women as seen by the Bible text, and Aaron did a clip of what we were talking about. And the beginning of that clip, Tomer read out a quote from the Middle Assyrian laws, which were written apparently 900 years before the text that we were reading. And I think some people in the comments of that video were a bit confused about what was being read, and they seemed to think that this was from the Bible. Which it's very similar to the Bible.
I find it kind of odd because I literally said at the beginning.
Yeah. It's true that in the video, in that clip video, it starts off Thomas like, okay, verse 16, Middle Assyrian laws, 55. But there was a little bit of a pause, and then he started the quote. But yeah, a lot of people in the comments maybe didn't watch.
Or maybe they thought Middle of Syrian laws. Maybe they thought Syrian laws was a book of the Bible.
That's possible.
People do tend to ignore a lot of the ones in the middle.
True. I mean, we are talking about Americans who, unfortunately, many people in a poll answered that Joan of Arc was Noah's wife.
Joan of Arc.
I hate all of it. I hate all of this. You just woke up and decided to make me angry today, didn't you, Ari?
Wow.
He did. That is oh man, I am not going to head desk. I am not going to break my nice computer.
So I did write a comment.
If you need to feel better, Lawrence, just remember that Pat Robertson is dead.
True.
Yes! Ding dong, the Lich is dead. I maintain he was just a demon in a skin suit for most of that.
Yeah, well, I watched him. It was 1993 or 94, but I remember watching him because I would sometimes watch the 700 Club just to piss myself off. But I caught him on one of his shows where he told his 37,000 some odd followers in the Christian Broadcasting Network to go out and kill homosexuals where you find them, because he said that God visited earthquakes upon the United States because he said the U.S. was the only nation that allowed homosexuals to live.
Even though
I would like to point out,
he thought that executing homosexuals would prevent earthquakes. Because apparently earthquakes only happened in the United States, according to him.
Also, Canada here, we had gay marriage 10 years before you did. So any Trumpy people trying to run across the border to us, no, you're not allowed. Fuck off.
Yeah.
We love our gay people. We'll have a line of them kissing at the border.
Regarding that, Mike Makepeace put in the chat, Pride. Pat Robertson is dead, everybody.
I love the timing. The timing feeds my soul.
It is Pride Month.
I also realized that 9/11 was a good thing to, wish death upon people, because that's not a really good hard thing to have.
You're not wishing death on somebody. He's dead.
No. What I'm saying is, I didn't wish death for him, but man, I'm going to revel in it, because he was such a horrible person that did some horrible things.
Rebecca Watson did a nice eulogy on him. I recommend it. Matter of fact, she did a eulogy so good for Pat Robertson. I'm going to put it in and put the link to that in the chat.
Oh, I want to watch that.
Or excuse me, not in the chat. I'm going to put it in the description of this video.
I'll see that.
I was like, what? Aren't interacting with chat? This is new.
All right, we've got a couple of comments here. Josh Workman says, "Hey, RN Raw, I'm thankful for your wisdom. You have helped me recover from Christianity abuse and freed me from deception. I'm still recovering, but I remind myself of the facts." Thank you so much for that. I tell you, I get messages like this at average about one a day and have been for a decade. This is what keeps me going. So Kicker White Lion says, 50 Chet Kroner, and says, "I'm sad I wasn't here for Tomer's Bible commentary. Any percentage speed run. He was on a world record pace."
Oh,
I was only helping Peter. I was only helping Peter.
Yeah, that was my fault.
So we're going to try not to make you do that again.
I was planning on
Bryce
doing more
Barnett
shows.
says,
Aaron, I was planning on doing more shows back to back because then we would go faster through the Bible. It would work.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Bryce Barnett says, I started watching the entire series. Have you found anything true in the Bible yet?
Yeah, it was
Well,
written.
there is a Ethiopia.
There isn't yet.
That
right.
exists.
Yeah, there are
Rain?
many of these places.
Egypt
are
exists.
real places. That is in fact true. So the stuff that we've read so far is remember, we have to remember context and genre too. So like where we have genealogical lists, those are probably from older sources, and like in some cases they don't really matter to like any like theological reasons, so they may as well be true. Like who cares? They don't affect anything either way. So like maybe, but they're just genealogical lists. And then if we're talking about like the Exodus, or if we're talking about Genesis being like, if we're talking about like the actual like creation of mankind, if we're talking about that stuff being literally true, no. We get more into literal truths once we get to the Deuteronomistic history. Those actually contain historical realities. So once we get
some
obviously it's
historical reality.
It's not Deuteronomy, but
it's all propaganda. But the thing is, any history is going to have some form of propaganda, and like that's just a fact of writing. Everyone is writing from their own point of view. So the like a lot of the stuff that is mentioned in the Deuteronomistic history is very real. There was the Hezekiah's tunnel, which was found. I'm actually including that portion in a book that I'm writing about it. And there, like the exile happened. There was
to Babylon, not Egypt.
Yeah. to Babylon.
The Sennacherib conquest as well.
Yeah.
I have to throw in here that there are true things. There are actually historic things in the Bhagavad Gita.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So
also in Spider-Man, I've seen the Daily Planet in New York.
And
Just
New York
saying.
exists. I mean, there's that too.
New York is a thing.
Yeah.
It is a real thing.
I would also add that the Egyptian court and how they had it set up with the details with Moses is not really, I find, historically accurate to how the Egyptian court was ran by the pharaohs. There's a lot of holes in how they have their structure. And frankly, maybe Lawrence, you agree with this or not. I find that a lot of the things they would talk about specifically around the magisters and everything else really felt more like it was a Jewish kingdom, not as an Egyptian one, if you look at how the Egyptians ran their kingdom. So what they're talking about very briefly that we've seen in Exodus so far doesn't even match up what we know about Egyptology.
Yeah, because, well, the thing is, it does, but only with the 5th or 4th centuries BCE. That's what it closely lines up with. And the thing is, it makes sense, at least for the Joseph story, I should say. At least,
but you know what you kind of know what I'm getting at, though, when I'm referring to this, though.
Yeah, it's not.
No.
All right.
I didn't. So there was one.
So there was one other thing when I was writing that comment. I looked and tried to get the verse that Tomer quoted, like what the actual writing, the section, and there is another section right after, which Tomer didn't say, which is also very relevant because it's more like Exodus 22 than actually the bit that he quoted is more like Deuteronomy 22, the case of a rapist. Right after that section 55, right, the one with where the wife of the rapist is raped by the father of the victim, whatever. There's another section 56, and it goes, If a maiden should willingly give herself to a man, the man shall so swear, they shall have no claim to his wife. The copulated shall give triple the silver as the value of the maiden. The father shall treat his daughter as he chooses. This is actually very similar to the case of the seducer in Exodus 22. And you can see that they have a difference between the two cases. You know,
they have
the
a difference.
doesn't.
The Bible doesn't, and that's the part
Right.
that makes me.
But when you get to the Bible,
stabby.
right, they've gotten rid of that really harsh bit of like raping the wife of the rapist. But then you end up where the two cases of a rapist and a seducer are very similar. The only difference seems to be that the rapist, if the father wants, the rapist must marry the girl and he can't divorce her himself. And with a seducer, it's like the father doesn't, only if the father really doesn't want it, will do they not get married. But it's, as you were saying, Lilith, it could be made like it could have been as a sort of loophole for young lovers to kind of get married without the father's permission. So it's like
the way I interpreted that.
Pressure.
The way I interpreted that, if you lived at that time and you're some useless young thug and you want a wife you don't deserve and can't afford, just pick out one that appeals to you, rape that one, and she's yours.
That's and that's not unjustified, but you were looking at a different section of the law. I'd like to point out in the ancient law, the rapist had to pay triple the bride price, which means he was financially penalized.
It's not triple the bride price, it's triple the silver, which is the bride price.
Yes, yeah, but the
don't
same
know
thing.
Exactly what it means.
The quantity being triple the
same
silver.
price as a virgin is what it means.
Right, exactly. He has to pay more because he didn't go about things the right way. What you were referencing, Aaron, is actually not this section in Exodus, but a later section, I believe, in Leviticus.
Deuteronomy 22.
Or is it Deuteronomy? Okay, maybe. Yeah, there's a couple of them. Where they say that the man who rapes only has to pay 50 shekels of silver and then marry the girl, but he can never divorce her. This means he gets her half price, because a regular price is 100 shekels of silver. So this is the distinction, is that in at least part of the biblical law, he basically gets a discount for being a rapist, whereas
I think it's the same price. Because
no,
in Exodus it doesn't say a price; it says the bridal price, and then in Deuteronomy it says 50 shekels. And then I don't know, it depends on the commentary. I think Rashi, for example, says, "How do we know how much the bride price is?" Oh, if you look in Deuteronomy, the case of a rapist, it's 50 shekels. So it must be 50 shekels here as well in the case of a seducer, which is also a bit backwards. But
yeah.
And seducer. Note that seducer and rapist are the same thing.
In this law, yes. Not in the
they're the
because
same.
The only thing of import here is that the virgin has lost her value as a virgin. That's the only thing that matters.
It's a crime.
It doesn't matter if it's love or violence to this culture. That's not the crime. You've defiled some man's property is the crime.
That's the main difference. Yeah.
And I would like to point out that while it doesn't say triple here, in Exodus 22:16, which we covered last time, it does say he must still pay the bride price for virgins. So he still has to pay the bride price. It's not triple, it's just the normal bride price, but it is not a discounted bride price.
The triple is from the Middle Assyrian laws where it says triple silver.
Because the Assyrians were better.
We don't
but elsewhere it clarifies that triple the silver is what the virgin
the bride price
would be.
In their culture was triple the
silver. Guys, the Bible doesn't support slavery, right?
Not at all. But that's why I asked people to put a sticky tab here, because in later law, we'll see that in fact he pays half price because it's 100 silver for a virgin bride, and it specifically says that, and then says that the rapist or seducer pays 50 silver. But we'll get to that later. So I just asked the sticky note so that we can make the comparison at the time, because we do need to actually read in order if we're ever going to get through all of this.
Yeah, so, let me get through a couple more comments and we'll go. Trevor and Wright says, does Lorence think that the story of the Exodus is significant as a story that shares any origin in Egypt? Can you please elaborate if you agree with this question?
If it shares any origin in Egypt, the Exodus story, no, not really. I think it was more
Because
about
for the fact that it doesn't, right?
right. Yeah, it was more about something else than it was about Egypt.
I know that there were a lot of conflations about Ramses being the pharaoh at that time, that they were saying that that would be the only connection, and even then, that's not confirmed. So that's one of those weird things about that. So
Right, like the thing is, in a sense, this is how polemics were written in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And then one more comment.
Okay.
Minute Rice says $6.66. RN got a snake out, and I didn't have to bribe him. It's a good day. Well, thank you for that, Minute Rice. This is my new baby. This is my reticulated python, and this little boy will grow to be 12, 14 feet in just like 3 years.
My goodness.
Oh yeah. So Dr. Kip is in here. I appreciate the book recommendation. I picked up the book, and I also picked up Francesca Stavrakopoulou's book on it as well.
Yeah. So that's not for everyone. That's not God and Anatomy. Francesca Stavrakopoulou actually did her PhD dissertation on the life and reign of the supposedly the worst king in the history of Judah, Manasseh.
Manasseh?
Yeah.
Manasseh. Yeah.
And devotes a most of the book to the topic of human sacrifice. I only feel bad that you had to, because you can actually get free PDFs of Heath Durrell's book. And
I mean,
really, I couldn't find it
too, but no. Oh,
at least I tried.
I prefer hard copies, anyways.
Sure.
Yeah. So.
Durrell's work on the topic is excellent, and he's a very he's a very sober-minded, careful scholar. So he's not like you'll notice too as you read through the book, he's very cautious about making like firm declarations about things that he thinks might be overly speculative. But yeah, it's a good read. So,
cool.
Hi everyone.
Hello.
Hi. Welcome.
Hello.
So thank you. I can
welcome, Dr. Kip.
Thank you.
Yes.
As I mentioned to Aaron in the email, I'll probably need to kind of pop in and out. So because I'm my wife broke her foot a couple weeks ago, and I'm kind of looking after her knee.
How dare you be a loving and attentive husband?
If you would, Dr. Kip, you're kind of a big deal on this topic, so I would love to have you introduce yourself to the audience who might not know.
Sure. I'm one of them. So, my name is Kip Davis, and I am a biblical scholar. I'm trained in Hebrew Bible. I've taught Old Testament. My actual specialty is Dead Sea Scrolls, early Jewish literature, and history. But yeah, no, this I've seen a couple of your guys' shows, and they look fun. So I am grateful for the invitation. So, and Exodus 4 looks lots of fun too.
Yes, it is.
Right. Who wants to read today?
Now, did we decide how we were going to break this up? Because 24 goes through pretty quickly, I believe. But 25 where they start talking about all the things he wants in the temple and stuff.
It starts there. Yes.
Yeah. So how are we going to do this?
Whatever you choose. I mean, you can read from 24, from 1 to 11, and then 12 to 18. But whatever you want.
Okay. I'll read. And 1 to 11, right?
Yes.
But I'm going to do it in KGB, too.
Ooh, fancy.
Ooh.
Are you going to do it with a Southern accent?
Oh, please, Rhonda. That'd be wonderful.
It's hard to produce that, even though I'm from Texas on demand, And I'm half Asian, and when people ask me for an Asian accent, I'm like,
Okay.
Do they know how many regions that covers? Because that is not a specific request.
Yeah. All right. Here when we last left Moses, he was on Mount Sinai and talking to God. And he said unto Moses, "Come up unto the Lord, thou, and Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel, and worship ye afar off. And Moses alone shall come near the Lord, but they shall not come nigh. Neither shall the people go up with him." And Moses came and told the people all the words of the Lord, and all the judgments, and all the people answered with one voice, and said, "All the words which the Lord hath said, we will do." And Moses wrote all the words of the Lord, and rose up early in the morning, and builded an altar under the hill, and 12 pillars, according to the 12 tribes of Israel. And he sent young men of the children of Israel, which offered burnt offerings and sacrificed peace offerings of oxen unto the Lord. And Moses took half the blood and put it on the basins, and half of the blood he sprinkled on the altar. And he took the book of the covenant and read it in the audience to the audience of the people. And they said, "All that the Lord has said, we will do, and be obedient." And Moses took the blood and sprinkled it on the people. Oh wow, this sounds like a gore concert. And said, "Behold, the blood of the covenant, which the Lord hath made with you concerning all these words." Then went up to Moses and Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, and 70 the elders of Israel. And they saw the God of Israel, and there was under his feet, as it were paved, a work of sapphire stone, as it were the body of heaven in his clearness. I thought you weren't supposed to look at God. And upon the nobles of the children of Israel he laid not his hand, and also they saw God, and did eat and drink.
Yeah,
You
they
can actually
saw
finish
God.
this chapter because most of my commentary is for 1 to 11, but
Yeah.
So that was through. Was that 11? I think.
that
That
was
was
11.
through
Yes.
11. Yeah. Do put a sticky note here, those who are looking for biblical contradictions, because remember that no man ever has nor can see God, but Moses and Aaron and the 70 elders of Israel did and ate with him, but they couldn't, but also they did. So
this is
I have a comment on
And
this.
no
but,
man has ever, except all these who did. No man
Right.
except them.
Yeah.
But not them.
There's a caveat here, though.
Maybe they were all women.
Should I start, or do you want to finish the chapter?
No, I think
I
going
can
over what we
finish
have
the
so
chapter
far
if you
is-
want.
Oh,
Okay.
I think
Okay.
we should
No,
cover
I'll
what we
start my
have so far.
commentary.
Yeah.
I'll start my commentary. Okay, verse 1. While some commentators, like Ibn Ezra and Maimonides and Rashbam, wrote that this event happened after the Ten Commandments were spoken, others, like Rashi, Bechosho, and Chizkuni, wrote that the event happened before the Ten Commandments. Again,
slow down a little bit. You're not in a rush today.
Oh, you want it slow?
I actually want to hear what you have to say this time.
Oh, you didn't hear me?
No, I mean, I didn't think that was fast. That was Tomer's regular speaking voice.
Is it?
Yeah.
Maybe I've been away for a while, so maybe I missed it.
Okay, and now Nadab and Abihu. These are the elder sons of Aaron, according to Exodus 6:23. Chacham comments that Scripture hinted here that Aaron's virtue will pass to his sons. While the Hebrew Bible does not mention Aaron's younger sons, Eleazar and Ithamar, the Samaritan text does. And then worship at the distance. Hebrew Bible reads, bow down from afar. Avishur comments, bowing to someone from afar indicates great respect that is given by those who bow to him. And Ugaritic letter, RS 29.093, lines 8 to 10 reads, at the feet of our Lord we fall 14 times at a distance. According to this, bowing from afar, both in Ugaritic and the Bible, shows the reverence that prevents from getting too close. See Jacob meeting Esau in Genesis 33:3.
So they bow 14 times at a distance. Is that what you said? I just want to confirm
That's from the Ugaritic.
I see.
Okay.
And then verse 4, Moses then wrote down. While Ibn Ezra comments that Moses wrote the Book of the Covenant, Rashi comments that Moses wrote from the beginning of the Bible up to the account of the giving of the Torah.
Yeah.
Of course he did. My ex-husband believed that Moses sat on a mountain and God dictated Genesis to him and showed him a vision of creation. That literally, that was what happened. So
that's essentially what they think. Yeah,
that is a genuine and sincere belief by a lot of people, which I find horrifying.
Yeah, the thing about Mosaic authorship, aside from it being a historical impossibility, is that it like there is that part, of course, where Moses dies, right? But like, okay, well, you know what? Okay, Joshua wrote that part, but everything else, even though I have heard one explanation where they're like, okay, no, Moses wrote that too, but he was crying when he wrote it.
Yeah, that's Chazal.
Yeah, and never mind the bit about how there has not been another prophet of his magnitude until this day, even until this day, which is rather meaningless if you're writing it a week later.
Yeah.
Well, sorry, no.
There was never.
There are portions where until this day is kind of meaningless.
Yeah.
Okay, verse 6. So that's the start of the blood ceremony. According to Meir Malul, scholars debate about the meaning of the blood ceremony. Many think that the ceremony symbolizes the creation of a sacramental communion between God and his people, and the blood portrays the connection between the two sides. Such ceremonies are seen in many traditions and are preserved in ancient Arabic and classical literature, for example, Herodotus' Histories, Book 3. Others think that the blood ceremony was an oath ceremony, and the blood was used as a kind of self-curse, as seen in Aeschylus' 7 Against Thebes, lines 42 to 48. Still, others see the blood ceremony as sanctification, since in the Bible, blood is seen as holy and appears in many purification and sacred rituals, like Exodus 29, verses 20 to 22, Leviticus 8, 22, and 14, verses 12 to 18. According to this, the ceremony gave holiness to the people.
The ceremony itself, even though it's like just like a little bit of it, the whole blood in the basins thing, that reminds me of the consecration of the temple.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That was part of it. I mean, the consecration of the temple is this whole bigger thing. Like the sacrifice was like massive. Like once we get there, it's kind of
Anyone else watch Dark Matter 25 with the dead cattle sacrifices piled straight up to the clouds?
Yeah, I mean, it had to be. It was huge.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, but this reminds me about that. Some of the blood on the basins, and then they used to have for something else. But yeah, on the altar. Yeah, this is, while of course not the full consecration of the temple, this is a little bit of it.
While we have Kip, and before he has to jump off, I want to ask this important question regarding "and they saw God" versus other verses where they say that no man has ever seen God. Is this a contradiction, Dr. Kip?
Well, I think it depends on how you look at it. It feels to me like the text itself is qualifying this a little bit by pointing out that they saw God and didn't die, which is something that you'd expect. But I would, when I look at these sorts of things, this is just I would say it's a contradiction in the sense that you've got like this is what you see all throughout the Torah. Essentially, are these varieties of perspectives of who God is and how he operates.
And then we also have to clarify that when the Jews are writing about God and that they can see God, they're not talking about Jesus.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. No.
Because I've heard many Christians argue that God is a spirit, that God doesn't have a body. It doesn't matter that the Bible talks about him walking, talking, sitting, eating, turn his head, wave his hand, show his backside, and cheat at wrestling. Although I realize that the last one is just is interpreted as an angel and not necessarily God. And maybe some of these others are too. But in this case, we're not talking about an angel playing the part of God. We're talking about God. And we're not talking about the Son of God. We're talking about God the Father, Jehovah, who obviously has a body. We're looking at it. He's got feet.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. On that, so Romer, I think he uses part of this in his argument that the Ark of the Covenant was a statue of Yahweh in the temple.
Right.
So I mean, I found his argument very convincing. Honestly, like I thought it explained a whole lot.
Intriguing thought.
Yeah. So if this, his eating at his feet and the sapphire pavement as well, kind of it describes them very very physically. So I would like to know Kip's thoughts on that. I found it convincing personally.
No, I haven't read Romer. On that, I've encountered that through Francesca's new book, where she talks about it. And yeah, it's an intriguing idea to me. I'll have to go check it out. But I think there's some merit there.
Invention of God is where he goes over it.
Yeah, like just by virtue of the fact that there is so much, there's so much crossover between the things that you read throughout the biblical text about early understandings of Yahweh compared to what you see, in Canaanite literature and in the iconography. It just seems to make sense, right? I wanted to, if I could, I wanted to point something out in verse 4 here, which I think is really interesting. And this, I have a strong interest in religions and worship practices in Canaan, and in verse 4 it says that that Moses erected 12 matzebah. These are generally what scholars consider to be standing stones, which were large rocks that they would stand up in a cult site. And we don't have a clear. Yeah, but much
closer to an obelisk,
much
maybe,
smaller.
Not as
Yeah.
big.
Yeah, and
No,
you'll see
that vibe.
These things, they're just most of the times they're just big rocks, right? That they'll stand on edge. One of the thoughts, I think the most reasonable thought about this is that these are representations of deities of some sort.
Oh, very interesting.
Right? So
Yeah.
I think what you have happening here is a reflection of an actual cult practice, but then one that's probably been sanitized at a later period of time, where these standing stones, which in the original thought probably had some sort of representation of other deities. Now the writer's coming along and saying, no, these are representative of the 12 tribes of Israel, which is a thing that you'll see taking place quite frequently throughout the text. Representations of other deity will be reconstructed or reconfigured in such a way to reflect something.
I've noticed that a lot, where there seem to be sort of a retroactive explanation for an existing practice to try and make it kosher, would be the best term, perhaps.
Yeah.
In a lot of the stories, which is sometimes a comfort, because some of those stories I'm very glad they're probably not true.
Well, it can also be a form of revisionist history too. That's a big part of what we see a lot. And like this type of idol worship, for example, would be fascinating if this is actually what it is. But it definitely would make sense when you think about, the origins of different religions up to this point. So yeah.
So, although
really cool.
In the same vein, I'll just say this one more thing: the 70 elders of Israel seems to be a reflection of this idea that you get from I think it's in the Onama Elish, where El has 70 sons.
Yeah, the biblical pantheon has 70 gods, I believe.
It's an important number, and you see it pop up all over the place.
Yeah, it's also important in the Bible as well. It's a typological number. Yeah.
So it could be symbolic and not literally 70 men. Specific.
Well, I think it probably reflects some of these early ideas about this this ancient Canaanite pantheon that did comprise of 70 sons of El. And again, just part of this whole program of reconstituting the text in this new world where they're trying to get away from these polytheistic ideals.
Sort of like how the Catholic Church wrote a lot of saints out of previous pagan gods and goddesses like Bernice or Beatrice.
Yeah,
or,
I don't know anything about that, but yeah.
Oh, that definitely happened in Ireland and a few other places. But yeah, similar idea where you take an ancient story and make a saint out of it, because that was the old canonization process involved someone who had been dead for at least 400 years. So that left plenty of interesting ways to come up with fancy stories there. But further to your first comment, I noticed specifically that they make a great point of that not only did the 70 elders and Moses and Aaron see God, but they ate with him. They saw and ate and drank. And this is because, of course, other stories are all about how you can't possibly stand in the face of God and you'll collapse and you have to take off your shoes because it's holy ground. And the idea of being able to sit and eat with the God is incomprehensible.
I also have a comment on that, but I'll wait.
I do too, in fact.
Excellent.
I do think it is important to point out. Now, there's an ambiguity here, right? Like, the text actually says they saw Elohim, and then it just says, and they ate and they drank. So, is God eating and drinking with them? We don't know. The text isn't explicit about that. So, but I think.
Well, in Genesis, what is it, 30 or 32? I forget. When three guys show up at Abraham's house,
it's 18,
and Abraham recognizes one of them as being God.
Yeah.
And two of them leave, and they become the angels in Sodom.
Yeah.
And the one that remains, or they don't explicitly say this, but two of them left. What that would mean, one remains, and that Abraham drew nigh to God to inquire of this thing, and then they sit at a tree and eat.
Yeah.
Abraham and God.
That would induce that God has a digestive system, and then by contradiction, death and things occurred before the start of the whole thing in Genesis. So it's if that is the case in this story, if these people, for example, are eating alongside and God is eating too, that would induce a completely different point of view, and therefore it's contradictory in its own right.
I'm seeing the comments piling up, and as they
Yep. Mark Smith says, I may have missed the intro, but out of curiosity, what are Kip's specialties? Well, we already addressed that one. James Smith offers $1 with no message. Eric Wander gifted one RN Raw membership. Thank you. M. Doug offers £5 and says, was it lapis lazuli and not sapphire? And
in my JPS translation, it does say lapis lazuli, but I think it does. It is lapis lazuli, actually.
That makes more sense.
It does. Okay. It seems a bit like they're like
in Hebrew. Sorry, go on.
No, I was just saying it seems a bit like they're trying to describe something shimmering and bright and sort of colored, but sort of not. So like, it was like this, it was like that. Like it's not, literally sapphire or lapis lazuli.
I will just.
Though, at least not as shimmering in that way. So it'd be sapphire if that were the case. That's a good question.
So Alter translates it as sapphire. He says many scholars think that the Hebrew sapphire refers to lapis lazuli. If the Hebrew term is actually cognate with sapphire, the writer clearly has in mind a blue sapphire.
Yeah. It's BDB dictionary also sapphire, perhaps also lapis lazuli.
And I did want to make a note about specifically 3 through 8. So Van Setters has a fairly lengthy argument on this, so I'm just going to jump to his conclusion on it. But it's the original version of the stone tablets is certainly the one in Deuteronomy 5:22, where it is clear that there were 2 tablets on which were written the 10 Commandments inscribed by God and given to Moses. It is only at a much later time that Moses wrote the rest of the laws in a book and delivered them to the people in the land of Moab. We have seen above that in Exodus 24, 3-8, the Yahwist has combined both the words and the ordinances in the Sinai revelation and put them in Moses' book at the same time. Now in the divine tablets of stone in Exodus 24:12, which are no longer 2 in number, he also includes both law and commandment. So it takes those 2 things that were once separate and puts them together into this new thing. So that is why it's dated later than the one in Deuteronomy.
You'll encounter as we go through. Sorry, I'll just say this and then you can go. But you'll encounter as you go through the text, especially once you get to Deuteronomy. You have I like to pay attention to whenever Moses is reading or he's writing. Like in this instance, it's the literally the Book of the Covenant, right? So that is restricted to a specific piece of literature. Particularly when you get to Deuteronomy, then you encounter things like the inscription or the writing of the precepts and the instructions and the Torah. It's thought that these are specific known pieces of writing that don't extend to the whole what we understand to be the Torah, right? But it is very interesting to kind of track and see what they're reading and when they're reading them and what they're understanding from what they're reading.
Okay, I'm going to read a couple more comments here, see if we can get caught up. Willow Wisp says, including Moses's burial as written by Moses. Yeah. And then Trevor Wright said, why is it that the stories in the Bible are entangled with different great nations of the past? But is there evidence that the Israelites were involved in the history of these nations?
I mean, you have the, I think that's the Meneptah still, which does mention Israel. And
we did talk about
I
that
think, and the kingdom of Judah and Israel did exist. So I think they were involved in the history.
Yeah, they certainly were involved in them to some extent. At least, past what we would view as the monarchic period.
Like the United Kingdom.
Yeah, in that section of time. Yeah, they certainly were involved. So you could definitely view a lot of these as polemics. In fact, very, very explicitly in some cases, they are polemical against these opposing nations. In the same way that Egypt had like the 9 bows to represent its enemies, Israel represented these lists of nations and their enemies as their enemies as well.
Okay, and then Zarnar and Kar says, if this is too much of a diversion, I understand, but wasn't God supposed to be contained in the Ark of the Covenant?
No,
not
no,
quite.
No, it's the
it's not a genie. Although I can understand the confusion. They do look a lot alike.
If you rub the ark, though, you die. You don't pull the genie out of the bottle.
Yeah, that's later on. But I think that the tablets are contained. It's later on. I think, but he's speaking above it. I think. I don't know if it's talking about chapter 25, but we'll see later on.
Then Jason Martin said, did the Jews believe in multiple gods as real, but theirs is better?
I mean, you could argue that in the kingdom. You could argue that. I mean, the Bible does say that during the kingdom of Israel and Judah, they did believe in multiple gods. So, yes.
So it depends on the time period. Go ahead.
Can I make a clarifying? Go ahead. Can I make a clarifying point here?
Mm-hmm. Certainly.
From an historical perspective, when scholars talk about Jews and Judaism, that's exclusive to like the period after the Achaemenid Empire, basically starting in 400, moving through the Second Temple period is what we consider properly Judaism. Anything before that is loosely understood to be Israelite religion or Hebrew religion or forms of Canaanite religion. Yahwism, you could call it that too. And I think it's important to make this distinction because we really have a a very we have much less of a clear understanding of what the religion prior to the Babylonian exile looked like, especially in comparison and contrast to what took place after. If you want another good book recommendation, everybody should read Jonathan Adler's new book. What's it called? It's his newest one, which is basically he has tracked um, the origins of Judaism. How far back can we trace Judaism proper on the basis of elements that are considered to be properly Jewish: dietary laws, Sabbath observance, certain festival celebration, and basically he figures. The premise in his book is that it wasn't even normative as far back as the Hellenistic period, like the 300s. And really, what happens, for what scholars are discovering more and more, is that there's like this black box of no information that pretty much appears. There's this period from the Babylonian exile, from the destruction of Jerusalem up to basically the end of the Persian period. We have almost no information at all about what Jews were thinking or doing. And then that's when you start to see the emergence of what we understand to be Judaism proper. And then before that is this cult of Yahwism, this Israelite religion, which is problematic reading it out of the biblical text, because these are texts that are at a minimum compiled and re-edited at a much later period of time to reflect contemporary ideas that are taking place after the exile.
I think that happens quite often.
Yeah.
And then John 73 John says, somewhat related question. If angels are supposed to be balls of fire, then how did the mob at Lot's house plan on raping them? Ouch, that's going to burn my willy.
I believe we already covered that in the discussion of whether or not the Eye of Sauron would count as a biblically accurate angel, and if that meant that that's what the crowd was into, which again, also, I don't even have that equipment, and ouch.
Well, I mean, we can agree at least that these young men were hot.
Yeah, of course. The balls of fire thing is far more explicit in apocryphal literature, or in pseudepigraphal ones. So, like in Second and Third Enoch, they are literally described as big as planets. They have wings that are made of fire and eyes that are made of fire, but they all use different words for fire. So, like, every single body part is distinct in the type of fire that it is. Is it a flame? Is it like any other cognate we can think of for fire?
Let's just call it what it is. The angels were hot.
They were. Yes, they were.
Yeah.
They were hot.
Yeah.
Then Willow Wisp says, if Aaron brings out the snake, he can turn into a staff or rod. Then he can be demonized or demonetized and demonized. Yeah. Then Assembly of God says, question for Dr. Kip, once and for all. And let me just start that again. Assembly of God asks, question for Dr. Kip, once and for all. Did Israelites sacrifice their babies to their God like the people of Molech did? I just need a clear answer.
A clear answer. Read 50-year-old book.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I will say it's disputed. This is still something that's controversial, but I think most scholars will say yes. And as a clarify, and something to like, there are varieties of religious expression prior to the emergence of Judaism proper much later. So I think the best way to answer this question is that yes, there were almost certainly cults of Yahweh who were engaging in child sacrifice. Something that Durrell brings out in his book is this idea, this variety of religious expression prior to this time. which we tend not to see because the Bible's trying to consolidate all this stuff, right? So, and the other thing too that is important to point out is that most don't think that Moloch was like a god of any sort. What these were types of offerings that involved the sacrifice of children. So you could offer a Molech sacrifice to a variety of different deities, perhaps even, or likely even Yahweh. And I mean, it is a bit. I feel like sometimes it's a bit trivial when you recognize that there's kings who are sanctioned in Judah for offering their own sons as sacrifices in the first place. Who was it? It was Ahaz, I believe, offered his child as a sacrifice, and so did Manasseh, according to the Deuteronomist. And the text isn't clear on this. Were these sacrifices? They were child sacrifices.
Well,
but
I think it is clear.
Is it clear that they're offering them to other deities?
Well, it's like in Exodus 34, it goes through that thing about, how you will sacrifice your firstborn sons on my altar. And then you have other places where you can buy your way out of that if you've got a sheep or a goat or something of equal value to your firstborn son. But then you get to Ezekiel 20:26, and there it has God lamenting that he created laws that they could not follow, and that specifically they cannot follow because he created the law to horrify them at the demise or the sacrifice of their own children.
Exactly. And there's that weird story where Moses' wife circumcises their baby and throws the skin at the feet of Moses so that God wouldn't kill them.
The argument
I've already covered this in the Exodus 4, but it's just there's so much detail in this and so many versions of the story that
is a crazy story.
Yes,
it is. I will say
angels. Some say it's this. I don't.
There is an argument that circumcision may have started as sacrificing a small portion of the baby instead of the baby, and that could be part of the symbolism of it.
We know that Carthage, for example, hundreds of years later, sacrificed their kids to gods.
Yeah,
and that was a big part of one of those questions about morality in general. So to say that this might be a possibility is not without reason. When you think that we actually have evidence of these things happening in other parts of the world for a bunch of different reasons for religious purposes.
Yeah,
so I wouldn't go that far as saying that this is not possible. Now, is it relevant to this? I don't know, but that's just something that
the later writers felt the need to, to say against it. Like, do not do it.
Yeah, don't do it. So
nothing is prohibited, which has not yet happened.
It will happen again and again.
Yeah. Then Assembly of God asks another question for Kip. It says, we know there was a famine in Judea. Is it because the Jews refused to eat seafood?
I think that's a joke.
I'm hoping so.
There were multiple famines.
Okay. And then M. Doug says, if a child is taken from its mother at 7 weeks and given to Yahweh along with animal sacrifice, surely that part is baby burning? Well, we discussed previously that there are people who interpret this as you're supposed to give the children to the priesthood. That your children and your goats are supposed to go to the priesthood.
No. So I'm pretty sure it's 7 days, isn't it? And this is part of the problem. Within this ancient culture, when you remove a weaning baby from his mother at 8 days, they're not going to survive. So this idea that you're just giving the child over to the priesthood doesn't work because they're going to die.
Yeah.
So it's pretty obvious from within the text. These are offerings. These are child sacrifices. And I mean, the argument has been made by who was it wrote a commentary on Exodus back in the 90s and said,
Prop,
yeah,
Prop wrote it in 2006.
Right, that's it. The first volume was in the 90s, though, wasn't it?
I don't remember. I know that the commentary that I use is from 2006.
Okay, and in there, I'm pretty sure he says this is absurd because
He
like for
as I said
evolutionary
previously,
reasons, right?
I don't remember exactly. He said that he dedicates several pages of this, and then he concludes that it's not probable. If I remember correctly, it says that any evidence for the sacrifice of a Carthaginian children and Israelite is circumstantial, something like this.
I would agree with that, just because Carthage is so late, and also because we have reasons to suspect that Herodotus, I think it's Herodotus who wrote about the Carthaginians. We have reasons to suspect that his account is badly
Greekified,
wildly exaggerated. So, but the more, and I would encourage, Lorence now has Durrell on order, and he's going to read it, and then he'll be able to come back and report all this stuff to you guys. But Durrell goes through Prop's whole line of argument, and I think pretty effectively quashes a lot of it, just on the basis of the circumstances and understanding what the economy like just the basic economy of the period is like. In the first place, as I mentioned, it's impossible to just remove these suckling babies from their mothers for them to survive. That's just not, they're going to die. You can't just remove them and save them for service. In the second place, child mortality was so high in the period. I think especially for first-time mothers, I believe the child mortality of your firstborn was already like excessively high, up over 50%, if I remember correctly. And the whole notion behind this, the whole notion behind sacrifice, period, has to do with ensuring a better future result. So, you offer your firstborn lamb as a sacrifice, and in your mind, that's going to ensure better results for the rest of your flocks, your agriculture. The same holds, in the mindset of your own family, your own offspring. If you sacrifice that firstborn child, and bear in mind that this is one of the priorities within this culture, is just to keep having children, because that's the surest way to that's the best way to ensure the survival of your own line, your own family, yourselves as a group. So by sacrificing that first one, the mindset is this is going to make it better for us in the long run. And there was some traction, I think, within this culture through recognizing that women, after they had that first child, had an easier time with the second, third, fourth one. So in a sense, this was almost a fulfillment of what they were doing. If you sacrifice that first one, things are going to be better for us. We're going to have more.
Future babies will be healthier, live longer, will have more survive.
So I think there's a lot of traction to this idea that it may not, it may not have been widespread, and I think you probably had to have some means to even be in a position to offer a child as a sacrifice. So yeah, no, not everybody was doing this, but it was certainly I think we can set it in terms of a viable option that was not frowned upon. In these
importantly, well, not everybody was doing this. There were some people doing this.
Yeah, I think very likely.
Our politics are very divided here, especially where we live in Texas, on abortion and the sanctity of life. And here God is maybe commanding the sacrifice of a firstborn born baby. So like how, you know, how judgmental is God going to be about abortion?
Well, if you read the Bible, God loves dead babies. It's his favorite thing.
Yeah, we haven't gotten to Numbers 5 yet. We'll talk more about abortion.
Yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there. But
he also does love the smell of burning flesh too. He just loves that cookout from Solomon. He loved it.
Again, I'm sorry that I'm interrupting
we
again,
do need
but
to read.
Yeah, we do need to read. We like 30 minutes for comments, but I also see another comment. So, Aaron,
these are really great.
Okay.
So
Assembly of God says, question for Dr. Kip: is sacrificing firstborn the same as baptism? Is there any connection based on later Christian fathers' writings?
I don't think so. I don't see a connection. He might have to spell that.
Well, I can show you the connection. Remember, Moses is sprinkling blood and splattering blood all over everything, including the altar.
Yeah,
imagine the scene.
I would say no, though. I would say no, because so if sacrificing a firstborn, it's just sacrificing a firstborn. But baptisms are, for everyone.
Identify the fact that we're actually asking questions about this in the first place, of the mental possibility of this based upon what we know about these stories.
Isn't baptism for babies a much later idea?
Christening,
yes and no. Although the argument has been made that it's okay to baptize babies without their consent because it was okay to circumcise babies without their consent. Although obviously, of the two things, being sprinkled with a bit of water is significantly less impactful in the long run. I'm just really glad that Christianity stopped sprinkling people with blood and went to the water thing, because there's a lot of blood magic, and we're just barely dipping our toe in with the sprinkling.
Well, baptism was also known as to Christians as being born again.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's the connection you're making. I don't know.
That would make sense to me. That's what I think that they were asking.
I'm pretty sure that's what Paul says, isn't it?
Die to self, rise to Christ in the water. Yeah.
All right, so let's. Who's reading now?
I haven't.
Lunder,
I haven't finished.
It's not an official episode, guys.
Yes, it is.
We did it.
Yeah. Okay. Back to verse 6. The bowls here in Hebrew, it's aganot, singular agan. This word appears only 3 times in the Bible, in this verse, in Isaiah 22:24, and Song of Songs 7:3. According to Avishu, this word is similar to the Akkadian aganu, Ugaritic agan, and Aramaic agana. It was a large metal plate weighing between 25 to 28 kilograms, and for the Americans, between 55 to 62 pounds, that was used to contain liquids such as water, wine, and beer.
Yeah, and there were basins like this outside the temple as well.
Yeah. Verse 8, sprinkled it on the people. According to the Aramaic translations, he sprinkled the blood on the altar to atone on behalf of the people. Ibn Ezra comments that he sprinkled the blood on the elders as they represented all of Israel. Casuto writes that he could have sprinkled it on the pillars that represent the 12 tribes. Sfono, however, wrote that he sprinkled it on the people. Like, literally. And now, verse 10. Saw the God of Israel. So the Septuagint reads, they saw the place there where the God of Israel stood. Targum Onkelos translates, they saw a vision of the glory of the God of Israel. Maimonides writes that seeing God refers to an intellectual perception of God. Ibn Ezra says they saw in a prophetic vision. Rashbam says they saw God's back. And I like Rashi's comment here. He writes, they gazed intently, and failing in this, they peeped in their attempt to catch a glimpse of the Supreme Being, and thereby made themselves liable to death. But it was only because God did not wish to disturb the joy caused by the giving of the Torah that he did not punish them instantly, but waited for Nadab and Abihu until the day when the tabernacle was dedicated, when they were stricken with death, and for the elders until the event of which the text relates in Numbers 11:16, and quote, and when the people complained, and the fire of the Lord burned among them and destroyed Biktzeh HaMachaneh, those who were the Ktzinim, nobles of the camp. Yeah. And under his feet, Sfono comments that this refers to the earth, as seen in Isaiah 66:1, which reads, the earth is my footstool. Targum Onkelos translates, the throne of his glory. Sarna comments, The language is circumspect. There is no description of God himself, only of the celestial standing beneath the visionary heavenly throne. Even so, the Hebrew particle ke, like, is used in order to indicate mere similarity and approximation. And then,
So,
sorry.
so when you look upon God, you will surely die. And God warns you that if you look upon him, you will die. But he opted not to punish those who looked upon him anyway. So it's not that you will surely die, it's I will kill you.
I have a question about that too. This is related, I promise. God killing you, you shall surely die if you look upon me. Isn't that the desire of most people to go into heaven and be with God? Therefore, going into heaven and everything else, or hell?
There's no heaven at this
No,
point.
there is the Sheol, the underworld in the Bible.
So wouldn't that be?
And everybody goes there regardless of what happens.
Right.
Yeah.
So my thought is that if you surely die, wouldn't that be desirous then?
No, because it's not the place where God is, though. Sheol is the realm of the dead.
Yeah, and as Kip was pointing out, at this time, there's no concept. Well, there is a concept in Zoroastrianism that you can ascend to some heavenly realm.
Okay.
Kip, your camera went off. I don't know if you dropped out. But anyway, in Zoroastrianism,
I'm just getting more coffee.
Okay, there's a concept in Zoroastrianism of ascending to heaven under the wise Lord Ahura Mazda, but that's not an aspect that Judaism adopted. Christianity reached back past Judaism to take that element when they created their heaven concept. But at this time, it's just like in Hellenist religion. I mean, just everybody that dies goes to the one and only land of the dead to be dead. There's like not a lot going on in the land of the dead.
In Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice, for example, one of the opening parts of the scene was a priest talking about this exact quote in the Bible. And see, at that time period, the concept of heaven did very much, and hell very much did exist in the 15th century. So my thought is that later on, of course, not in the original stuff, but later on, that became a thing about conflating those two things. Therefore, modern people would have then thought, well, wouldn't that be desirous? That's kind of my point of where I was going with that, because it's fascinating to me because of Sheol, as you said, I forgot about that. So thank you for reminding me. And the conflation of all of these things, I guess, I don't know. It seemed interesting to me, that contradiction and how people interpret it today. I know what you guys think about that.
Okay.
People that are willing to do a lot to avoid contradictions that are very plain in the text. I mean, yeah.
Okay. Do you want me to continue, or do you want to read the comment?
Please.
Okay, something like a pavement made of lapis lazuli. According to Ezekiel 1:25 and 10:1, God's throne was made of this material. The word for pavement, levena, could also be read as brick. Rashi therefore comments that this pavement symbolized Israel's woes, for they were subjected to do brickwork. Some commentators, like Saadia Gaon, Rashbam, and Chacham, wrote that levenat is derived from the lavan, which means white, meaning that the stone itself was white. Ibn Ezra, however, writes that the stone was red, but I think most commentators will say that this is sapphire, which is blue, and represents from what I've read, some that say that it represents the sky.
Well, I mean, the whole thing about what it represents. It could represent a whole bunch of stuff, not necessarily the sky. The sky can work for it, but it's the way that ancient artwork can be viewed is in a myriad of ways, and sometimes it honestly seems kind of arbitrary, and really we're just reading into it. Like, it's not like we have records of people from that time saying this is meant to represent this and this is meant to represent this. Like, it's we're just kind of reading into these things, and we could be right, who knows, but it's our art history is filled with with a lot of assumptions, honestly. So
okay. Yeah. Okay. Verse 11. They saw God. The word that is used for saw here is yechezu, from the stem chet zain hey, which is different from the usual stem for to see, resh aleph hey, and usually means to behold or to predict. Sana comments, the general verb resh aleph hey, to see, is replaced by the stronger chet zain hey, to behold, which connotes far greater intensity, belongs to the vocabulary of prophetic vision, and qualifies the earlier statement by taking the encounter outside the range of natural ocular experience.
It sort of reminds me of the witnesses of the plates from the Book of Mormon who testified that they saw it, but it wasn't clear if they saw it in a vision in the spirit or whatnot. So it's sort of like, did you see it like I see my cat or no? So
Funny
yeah.
that we get the same thing with Paul, don't we?
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. They ate
about the sapphire
Sorry.
being like the material of the throne or whatever. There is also a Jewish tradition that the tablets were made from the same material.
Yes, yes.
You know what it reminds me of? The Gate of Nebuchadnezzar, with the special blue
Yes.
iridescent what is it called?
Gates of Babylon.
Yeah, the glaze. There was a very specific blue glaze used on the bricks of the Gates of Babylon, which is blue and iridescent and very bright. And I saw a small bit of it at the Royal Ontario Museum, which was really amazing. But yeah, it sort of gives me that vibe of the shimmering and bluish, and these. I don't know. I'm wondering if there's a bit of a correlation there, but I couldn't justify it at this point.
No, I mean it was a very popular thing to use in art at the time. Like it was bright, colorful. It stood out. Like if you wanted to, I mean, like you mentioned the Gates of Babylon. I think it's called the Standard of also uses it as well.
Yeah.
I think it's the Standard of it has two sides to it. It's just a very common material used for artwork at the time.
Okay.
Especially for glorious and religious artwork.
Yeah, Standard
anyone has the chance, they
yes.
should
Standard
go
has
see
it
the
does.
Ishtar Gate at the Pergamon Museum in Berlin. It's phenomenal.
Wow, that's cool.
Okay. They ate and drank. Prop comments here. To eat before someone is to acknowledge his authority and beneficence, and conversely, one's own dependence and vulnerability. Compare the aristocracy eating and drinking before Adonijah in 1 Kings 1:25, and the prince eating bread before Yahweh in Ezekiel 44:3. Covenants, in particular, whether or not between equals, are celebrated by a feast to terminate the sometimes tense negotiations and to restore good cheer or its semblance. And that's it for this part of the commentary. For the next part, it's just one comment.
Yay.
Okay, so Lalandra, are you reading still?
Yeah. Verse 13. And Moses
12.
rose up. Oh, we're on 12. Sorry about that.
Yep.
Verse 12. And the Lord said unto Moses, Come up to me into the mount, and be there. I will give thee tables of stone, and a law, and commandments, which I have written, that thou mayest teach them. Which, he already gave them. But okay. And Moses rose up, and his minister Joshua and Moses went up into the mount of God. And he said unto the elders, Tarry ye here for us, until we come again unto you. And behold, Aaron and Hur are with you. If any man have any matters to do, let him come unto them. And Moses went up into the mount, and a cloud covered the mount. And the glory of the Lord abode upon the mount Sinai. And the cloud covered it 6 days. And the 7th day he called unto Moses out of the midst of the cloud. And the sight of the glory of the Lord was like devouring fire on top of the mount in the eyes of the children of Israel. And Moses went into the midst of the cloud and got him up into the mount. And Moses was in the mount 40 days and 40 nights.
What he eat?
Okay, my only comment here.
The consuming fire.
My only comment here is on verse 16. For 6 days. Sana comments, this is an example of a well-known literary phenomenon, the climactic use of numbers. It appears in Akkadian and Ugaritic literature and often in the Bible. An action continues for 6 consecutive days, and then a new event occurs on the 7th. Here, the 6 days are probably intended for spiritual preparation.
Now I get a little
pretty...
confused.
What do you mean by that exactly?
To be ready to see God.
What would that entitle?
I think it's a literary meme of the time, is it not? There's, you know, 6
no,
days.
I don't think Sarna has expanded on this.
Like 6 days to prepare to see God, to be worthy to come into the presence of God.
He's pumping himself up or something.
So yesterday we could all walk up the path, and God's there saying, "Hey, hi, I'm God," which everybody would like to see. You know, you're always asking me, "Hey, what evidence would you accept?" You know, God can do absolutely anything. Okay, well, have him say hi. But like he did for these 70 people. Hello, hi, bunch of people can see me all at the same time. You're not hallucinating. I'm really here. Yeah, that's nice. But now today, you go up the mountain, you're inside God, kind of in this cloud, and you've got to wait a week before you can see him, and then you don't see him. You see the glory of God, which when you saw God, you didn't see the glory of God. You just saw God. Hi, I'm God. But now you have the glory of God, which is like the all-consuming fire. Because again, this is the volcano that God is not supposed to be.
Because it's not. Like I already told you, this is a theophoric.
Like, you're going to say this on every volcanic reference. This book.
I also
there
are
also sea references. There's also warrior references. Like you can't just say, "Oh, well, it's this one thing." Like,
but there's a very clear. Honestly, I think there's a division of sources here, where there's a bit of a difference between how going to see God is treated, but the idea that you have to prepare yourself spiritually to go into the presence of God is a long-standing trope here, whether it's Moses having to take off his shoes to approach the burning bush, whether it's if you have time, you're supposed to engage in spiritual preparatory exercises. This could involve fasting, this could involve prayer, meditation, whatever. That's somewhat occasionally, but this is that same thing. And as Tomer pointed out, the whole 6 days, persevering through a whole 6 days of something or other, and then the climactic event on the 7th day is a literary meme from that time. And possibly, I mean, I don't know if that's the origin of the 7-day week and the Sabbath and all that jazz. That might be stretching a bit, but there could be some common ancestry there.
Whenever I hear these types of things, it always seems to be like different types of gods that have been kind of mushed together, and these stories are mushed together from different sources. You have your war stuff, you have your volcano gods, all mixed together from different points of view, possibly from different tribes that came together to discuss this, or even just people talking about this in general, then making these stories from all of these different points of view. It really
I'll grant what Lorence is talking about with regard to, we have reference to the air god, right? Where, the spirit of God moves over the surface of the waters and all that. There's plenty of that where I can see the air god as the inspiration. And then we have everything that the sun touches is your kingdom. And like they lifted for the Lion King. And that was the sun god, right? We've got elements of the sun god, that the inspiration of the sun god becoming integrated into the Jehovah character. But we also clearly, people will say there's not a volcano god in here. There fucking well is a volcano here.
And I have no doubt that at some point in the collective history and imagination of the peoples of that land, a volcano was seen and it was considered the wrath of a god. I mean, those types of images are definitely terrifying and awe-inspiring to this day, and we actually know what the fuck's going on. So, I have no doubt that contributed to the meme. That doesn't mean that someone actually went up into an active volcano and came down with magic rocks of,
And what Mighty Chicken is talking about, how you've got multiple elements here that are all being blended together, stapled together crudely in some places, where you're going to come up the mountain and get the commandments that I just gave you last week.
It's exactly why I use the documentary hypothesis, because that's what's going on in the text. Exactly what Mighty Chicken said.
I will contest
and it's a crude breakdown, but it works.
I will contest that because there are commentators that say that the Torah is not chronologically ordered. So
Yeah, what do they know anyway?
What,
Well,
the
there's a
Torah
reason
was
for that.
written by Quentin Tarantino.
Blood everywhere. Oh man, it makes so much sense.
Oh, Samuel L. Jackson. Samuel
And the
L. Jackson.
Okay, so I'm going to read some comments here. We got Sable Eagle says, if baptism is being born again and we're supposed to sacrifice our firstborn, should I tell my children I'll kill the first one of them who gets baptized? I don't have any. And then they clarify, I don't have any children.
Thank you.
Which,
on this channel.
which reminds me of Pugsley telling, or of Wednesday telling Pugsley that they have the tradition that they have to kill one of the surviving children, or one of the original children when they have a new baby. We're at which one? And she says, well, they only need one boy. So, Assembly of God, question for Aaron. Oh, I thought it was just all going to be Kip celebrity today. No, I still get some love. Okay. Question for Aaron. Do you think Christians borrow from Egyptian theology where they weigh the feather against the heart when it comes to sin in the wisdom of Thoth? I see little. I've heard all of these rumors about Christianity being based on largely on Horus and all like that, but I just don't see it myself. I don't see where Christianity took much.
Jesus.
I have something to say about that specifically, because the Egyptian religion was a very long-standing thing for thousands of years, and it did evolve and change. And there was that bit where they ran off after Aten, and then lots of assassinations and stuff. The stuff about Horus was made up for zeitgeist. It's nonsense. But the one thing, and this that may have influenced early Christianity or come up concordant with it, which did have baptism and a dying and rising God, was the Greco-Egyptian cult of Osiris. This is not the original Osiris. This is when the Greeks came and made little cult religions out of their own interpretations of the gods of various regions, because they loved ooh, look at the fancy foreign thing. It's so fun. Yeah. So the culturally appropriated Greek version of Osiris had a cult that very likely affected Christianity, or at the very least was affected by the same themes that were rising at the time as the Mithraean cult and all the rest of it. That does not mean that anybody was born on December 25th or had 12 apostles, although there may have been, there were 12 symbols around Mithras, which could have represented the signs of the zodiac. That's perfectly sane and reasonable thing to make. But we don't have their writings. We just have the writings of Christians arguing with them, yada, yada, yada. It's all a bit speculative at this point. But the Greek Osiris cult it's a very much a culturally appropriated version of the Egyptian religion. It's not the original, because I believe the original, they had to make a gold replacement for Osiris's manhood. So that's always fun. And I don't think the Greek Osiris cult took it that far that you had to, partake of that part of the gods' history and sacrifice.
But it would explain some. If that is the source of some of Christianity, at least I now understand what it means when it says, let Jesus come into you.
Yeah, and they had baptism, and the Mithraeans had communion, and there was lots of. Yeah, that's going to be a whole bunch of additional stuff there. But I just wanted to make the clarification that that is the pseudo-Egyptian source, I guess, of possible influence in Christianity, because there's the tracks on that are all over the place. You have to be careful.
Yeah, they're way too far culturally removed, where Egypt would not have had nearly as much influence at the time that Christianity was coming about. There's just no reason for that. You will find far more Greco-Roman motifs in Christianity than you would Egyptian.
Yeah.
So yeah, stuff like zeitgeist, trash. It sounds like the very first time I watched it, when I was a child, that is when it sounded convincing to me. But then after learning, I was like, oh no, this is not. No, this is bad.
I don't have enough.
I remember the
weed.
conflation when I first watched that. It was they were talking about, well, the son of God, and well, Horus, he's the son of Ra, and Ra is son. So that means,
oh my God, oh, you can't do that. They're two different languages.
Oh, and I mean, yeah, I know. I'm sorry,
Humans are pattern-seeking people, and like you'll see the patterns in the clouds, and sometimes it's not like the face of Jesus in the clouds or whatever. It's just clouds. It's not a pattern. So that's what people with the zeitgeist, they're seeing these patterns that seem to match.
It's called pareidolia. Humans seeing things in skies and making faces, because our brains are predesigned to see faces and see objects, because that's what we are envisioning every single day. So when we look at a bush, for example, that looks like a face of God, or something like that, what we're seeing is our own brains trying to make sense of the shapes and things that we are seeing. Or in the sky, we're seeing the clouds. Oh, that looks like an elephant. Well, of course, it's not a freaking flying elephant. This is not Dumbo, but we see it up there. And we think, well, that looks like that, or it looks like an airplane, or whatever else it might be. It's our brains trying to make sense of the world around us and to make sense of it. And that's really all it is. Also mushrooms, just have a few of those.
I have
amazing things.
I interviewed M. Murdoch, also known as Acharya S., who was a scholar who was referenced for Zeitgeist. So Zeitgeist, they make this movie Zeitgeist, and then they call on her as their scholar, whatever. And when I did the interview with her, I discussed these things that we brought up here, and she had to say, okay, yeah, they asked me these specific questions, these specific things, and I did contribute for these specific things. But then they went and made this movie wherein they said all of these other things. And one of them was, what Mighty Chicken just brought up about, the son of Ra, he's the son, so SUNSON. And regardless of the fact that, as Lawrence pointed out, these were completely different languages, right? Yeah. She said Acharya S. was complaining that when they went and did that kind of stuff and then cited her as their reference, so it destroyed her reputation.
Yeah, no doubt, and I feel really bad for her. It's insane how people, will be taken advantage of. Look at what PZ Myers in that anti-atheism video where they started asking them all kinds of weird questions, but they set up a whole website to make it look like they were a legitimate production company and everything else, and it was just smoke screens to get him to do this interview and then make a bunch of weird claims about his immorality as an atheist. I interviewed him about that, and he was like, they went through all these steps to make themselves seem legitimate and give sources and things, and here's our projects in the works and yada 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 yada, and it was just bullshit. And I understand why scholars can be hesitant to engage with that, and I feel bad for those who are taken advantage of.
I'm sorry that I'm interjecting, but we dedicated much of some of the time to reading the comments, and I was wondering if we'll get to 25.
Yes.
If you want to read Exodus 25,
if we'll get to 25 today, I mean.
Let me run through the rest of these comments that I have up on screen right now. Zarnaran Carr says, I'm a little bit confused. Where is the story taking place? Is this part taking place in the mountain where Moses gets the 10 Commandments, or just another place in the desert?
Depends on who you ask.
Maybe both. Because there's so many. Because one of the reasons that scholars differentiate sources in this longer section is because of how many times Moses ascends to the mountain. It just seems kind of ridiculous. Why would you have to go up so many times when it never said that you went down? So either one.
God had him on a yo-yo string.
Zarnaran Carr says, okay, I did get my other question answered, but when is the golden calf happening?
Exodus
I thought that was happening now.
32 to 34.
Yeah. And I'm gonna have a lot to say about that. I did a video.
Probably me as well.
Yeah, I did a video called "The Search for the Golden Calf," where I tried to, find which one's the original golden calf story, and how did it evolve over time? So, and then I asked the question: were the golden calves of Jeroboam real? I think they were, at least one of them. So, but yeah, that's what
At
the
Dan
video
and
said.
Beersheba, the high places at Dan and Beersheba, when the Northern Kingdom.
Yeah, Dan might have been a later addition, but
yeah, I
Fair
mean,
enough.
in the traditional chronology.
no, Bethel. Bethel is Bethel and Dan.
Sorry, Bethel.
I think we said earlier about how like the commentators say that it's not in chronological order. So actually, the story of the golden calf is supposed to happen next, but we then have.
For some reason, we get into a bunch of the instruction that technically is considered part of the law, but isn't really law because it's God saying
all
you
the
have to build
tabernacle
me.
Stuff is supposed to happen after these.
Basically, 25 is deliver me all your loot for a temple.
Yeah, that's supposed to happen after the golden
brass,
calf, according to the traditional chronology.
Yeah.
That would make more sense.
People got pissed.
Yeah. Gold.
So
silver,
M-Dog says, does the word Sinai refer to any harsh desert?
I think that the end of sin indicates something very hot. For example, Khamsin, and there is a desert called the wilderness of sin. So I'm speculating here because I don't know about the etymology.
Yeah, but the thing is, the Sinai area is in modern day Saudi Arabia, right? Like it's
no.
Yeah, so it would be pretty hot over there.
The Sinai Peninsula is is like part of Egypt.
And then Eric Wander says, for Tomer, if the Bible is not chronological, that means that Exodus 20 shouldn't be in that order. It should be later in Exodus. Or how does it work? Well, they've just said that God...
Sorry.
Go ahead.
As I stated earlier, depends who you ask.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's never one answer. There are always at least 4.
I think I sent a picture to I think I sent I took a picture of a book that had like the chronological order of events according to Rashi, which is that very
I think Exodus 20 is fairly simple, though. It appears to be a case where they wanted to give the 10 Commandments primacy in the story and thus moved them to that point in the story so that it would feel like we were beginning with them, even though they would not literally have been given at that moment, but come in later. That's just a literary choice that honestly is far less confusing than many of the other choices that have been made.
And then Assembly of God. Question for the panel. Where does the concept of dying and rising gods come from? Was it Zalmoxis, Attis, Osiris, or Elhana, or Jesus?
Inanna is probably
Inanna.
earliest. Is that one from the town of Uruk?
Yeah, so Inanna would be the earliest of those, but I want to point out that the idea of a dying and rising god motif, it came from Jacob Fraser, and Jacob Fraser was a pretty early religious scholar, and at the time we were just making these huge discoveries about these ancient texts. They hadn't even been fully deciphered yet, at least not well. So like so they're working off of not so great early translations of these works, and everyone was super interested in what these ancient texts said. So these early religious scholars, they would make a whole bunch of connections. So Jacob Fraser, T.W. Duane, a variety of people started making connections with the sources that they had at the time. But now we have better understandings of these texts, and the idea of a dying and rising god motif is simply untenable at this point. So, for example, Osiris, he dies, but then he rises in the underworld now, where he just is. Inanna just went down to the underworld and came back up. Attis is reborn in a different way. Like they are all. You would have to define dying and rising in very loose terms to create an actual motif out of this. So it's simply at this point an untenable motif to have. So Fraser's initial hypothesis hasn't seen serious support in a very long time because of that.
I would say of those 4, probably Osiris would be the most likely candidate for that hypothesis, simply because of his resurrection from his wife. That's the only thing I can think.
Well, that's
because I mean, he turned green afterwards, so the idea that he was green was because his body was rotting. That was the consideration for a lot
right,
of those.
But he's still dead. He's the god of the dead.
Yeah.
So in Zelmoxis, I'm not entirely sure. I have to look more into Zelmoxis, but
Inanna did actually die, but there seems to be some sort of motif of descending to the underworld and returning, which can be death or can be something more like Persephone, basically as a motif of winter and then spring.
That's what I would say too. Like perhaps it was some kind of symbolism for what they observed with how winter everything dies, and then the sun returns after the solstice, and here comes spring, and the whole earth springs to life. And
aren't there like two other myths of the same kind of thing? Where am I getting Alcestis confused with? What was the one where she ate pomegranate seeds?
Oh,
Persephone.
Yeah, Persephone. And so that is her death, but being associated with the seasons.
Although she doesn't die, she goes down and rules hell with her husband, sort of.
And she comes back, and it's spring. It's specifically they thought of the underworld as the underworld under our feet. Yeah, I think maybe even Sheol was under people's feet.
Yeah,
and life, if you notice, comes out of the earth when new plants grow. Could have been some kind of agricultural the thing, the dying
you bury bodies underground, so that's where they are.
Rising from the dead could be a form of symbolism.
Yeah, and maybe they've noticed cracks in the earth where all of this fire and brimstone are there, and it's something awe-striking. So this is where they're thinking that there must be something terrible under the ground, like Hades or
Hades.
Yeah.
Hades?
Yeah,
man. Oh, you want me to read Socrates?
Okay.
Sorry.
I'm sorry I'm interjecting, but I was wondering if we could extend this session for 25.
Yes, we can. We can extend the session and read 25.
Thank you.
Okay.
It is just basically an inventory of what Moses wants for the Ark of the Covenant, right?
Yes, and I have 4 pages of it.
But we don't have any. We don't have any pictures.
All right.
We don't need.
Let's. Who wants to read?
I'll
do it.
Okay, go ahead, Lilith, and let's speed through it because
Yes, ma'am.
All
right.
Read.
Don't have a 12-minute heart attack.
Read up to 22, please.
22. Okay, very good. Offerings and the ark. Exodus 25. The Lord said to Moses, "Tell the Israelites to bring me an offering. You are to receive the offering for me from each man whose heart prompts him to give. These are the offerings you are to receive from them: gold, silver, and bronze, blue, purple, and scarlet yarn, and fine linen, goat hair, ram skins dyed red, and hides of sea cows. Acacia wood, olive oil.
Sea cows?
We'll get to that.
Acacia wood, olive oil for the light, spices for the anointing oil and for the fragrant incense, and onyx stones and other gems to be mounted on the ephod and the breastplate. Then have them make a sanctuary for me, and I will dwell among them. Make this tabernacle with all of its furnishings exactly like the pattern I will show you. First, have them make a chest of acacia wood, 2.5 cubits long, 1.5 cubits wide, and 1.5 cubits high. Overlay it with pure gold, both inside and out. Make a gold molding around it, cast 4 golden rings for it, and fasten them to its 4 feet, with 2 rings on one side and 2 rings on the other. Then make poles of acacia wood and overlay them with gold. Insert the poles into the rings on the side of the chest to carry it. The poles are to remain in the rings of the ark. They are not to be removed. Then put in the ark the testimony which I will give to you. Make an atonement cover of pure gold, 2.5 cubits long and 1.5 cubits wide. And make 2 cherubim out of hammered gold at the ends of the cover. Make 1 cherub on one end and the second cherub on the other. Make the cherubim of one piece with the cover and the two ends. The cherubim are to have their wings spread upward, overshadowing the cover with them. The cherubim are to face each other, looking toward the cover. Place the cover on top of the ark and put in the ark of the testimony, which I will give to you. There, above the cover, between the two cherubim that are over the ark of the testimony, I will meet with you and give you all my commands for the Israelites.
Okay. Before we get to the part about the was it sea cows rendition? Okay.
Yes, make sure
first,
to get your manatees, guys.
First we'll get to verse 3. Gold, silver, and bronze. So Kasuto writes, the age in which silver was rarer and more precious than gold was already past. Hence, gold is mentioned first as the most valuable metal. The use of iron in the generation of the wilderness was still a novelty, and new things are not to be used for sacred purposes, in accordance with the principle of conservatism obtaining in ritual tradition. For this reason, no mention is made here of iron. And now verse 4, blue, purple, and scarlet yarn. Sauna writes, these are the most expensive dyed yarns of antiquity. The sequence, once again, reflects their relative value and thus the degree of sanctity that attaches to the objects in which they are used, starting with the Holy of Holies. The dyes were all obtained from animal sources, and the yarns were to be used for the tabernacle hangings and coverings and for the priestly vestments, end quote. Blue in Hebrew is techelet and purple argaman, and were both made from crushed snails. Saadia Gaon wrote that the scarlet yarn, in Hebrew tolat shani, which literally reads scarlet worm, refers to the kermes genus of scale insects. Modern commentators like Avishu, Prop, and Chacham accept this interpretation. Fine linen, in Hebrew shesh, the word probably derives from the Egyptian shes, which also refers to linen. And the goat's hair, Hebrew Bible literally reads goats without the hair. So just imagine. I just imagine who reads it like, oh, we should stick goats in it.
I mean, you could always build the tower with the tent with literal goats. That would be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, at this moment, it's just saying like these are the gifts, so you know what they're going to be used.
You like my temple? I made it out of goats.
Yeah. But it is to be understood as it's goat skins.
Yeah.
It's goat's hair. Sorry, goat's hair.
Dyed red.
We have to make that.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't say.
The ram skins are dyed red.
Oh,
yeah,
sorry,
the ram skins
wrong.
are dyed red. Yeah. 5. So the NIV says another type of durable leather, but in Hebrew it's tachash. The tachash's identity is not known, and different interpretations were given throughout history. Early translations refer to the tachash as a type of color, possibly based on the description dyed red from before. According to the Talmud, Shabbat 28b, the tachash was a creature with a single horn on its forehead, and it was debated there whether it was domesticated or not. It also reads, the tachash happened to come to Moses for the moment while the tabernacle was being built, and he made the covering for the tabernacle from it, and from then on the tachash was superseded and is no longer found. Suppressed.
So the unicorn.
Suppressed.
It's similar.
Modern scholars.
Yeah, but it's multicolored.
Sorry.
Yes. Multicolored is one of the traditions. It was a unique creature that doesn't exist anymore, and it was multicolored.
Yes.
But the idea of translating it as you're probably gonna comment about the modern translations.
Modern scholars usually identify the tachash as either dolphin or dugong, based on the Arabic tuchas. Bedouins make sandals out of their leather. Another interpretation is that the tachash is derived from the Akkadian dushu, the name for a precious stone that is either yellow or orange. And the KJV here, it renders badgers. And can you guess where? Yeah. And can you
badgers?
Guess where?
We don't need no stinking badgers.
And can you guess where this comes from? This rendition.
Is it a very late manuscript? Is it from that?
No.
No. Okay. Probably.
It is from none other than Martin Luther.
Oh, okay.
Dr. Rabbi Norman Solomon explains, In the Renaissance period, many scholars believed that the original human language was Hebrew and that other languages retained elements of it, if corrupted. After all, gamal and camel are the same word denoting the same animal. Someone noticed that the consonants taf, chet, shin of tachash resemble de, che, and s in German dachs, badger. Accordingly, Martin Luther, possibly on the advice of his friend and supporter, the humanist Georg Spalatin, translated tachash as dachsfelle, badger skins. Luther's German translation appeared in 1534 and influenced translations into other European languages, including English.
I'm not skinning a honey badger. Do you know what those things do? Honey badger don't give a fuck. Although the sea cows do appear to be a manatee type thing. So yeah.
I saw a video where one honey badger whooped 3 full-grown lionesses.
This is my surprised face.
Yeah.
Honey badgers don't give a fuck, guys. Don't forget.
Honey badgers will chase cobras up trees, get bitten by them, and like time out for 30 seconds and then go back to eating them.
Yeah.
There is
I'm not getting a badger.
The snake died, huh?
There is a common idea with religious people that God created the world and speaks, and the angels speak like this one language, which all languages come from, and the Tower of Babel are like confused is when other languages were invented, but they're all based on, let's say, Hebrew, biblical Hebrew.
Well, because Hebrew is supposed to be the language of God's people. So
and there's a lot of like weird esotericism and stuff that goes into like how this word actually comes from the Hebrew and the shape of the letters mean something or whatever. It's like,
the shape of the letter stuff. That
which
definitely
is funny because it's not even like the original Hebrew.
I had family members who got just about as mad talking about linguistic evolution as they did about biological evolution, because it was almost as sacrilegious to point out that all languages did not in fact come from the Tower of fucking Babel, than as to point out that all living creatures share common ancestry. So
you should have,
but I understand complaining about the shape of the letters. I mean, you can't have your holy documents written in Comic Sans.
Why not?
Oh, damn, I got to reconsider this cult I'm starting.
Any paper I ever see.
Comic Sans is actually easier for certain neurodivergent people to read, so it might be a really good scripture.
Well, I was there once, but yeah.
Verse 7, onyx stones, in Hebrew, shoham. The identity of this stone is not known. The Peshitta and the Aramaic translations render it beryl. However, the names of the sons of Jacob were carved on these stones, and according to Meir Malul, it's hard to carve on beryl. The Vulgate translates onyx stones, the Septuagint stones of sardius, aka carnelian. Kasuto, Malul, and Prop wrote that shoham is cognate to the Akkadian samtu, which is the carnelian. According to Genesis 2, verses 11 to 12, shoham comes from the land of Havilah, which is usually identified as Ethiopia or South Arabia.
Yeah, Yemen.
Yeah. Verse 9, Abishur writes, we find in Mesopotamian, Sumerian, and Babylonian traditions that their gods showed them their temple's pattern. It is told about Gudea, the Sumerian king of Lagash, that the god Ningirsu, in a dream, showed him the temple he had to build and even gave him its pattern in writing. The Babylonians say that the Esagila, the magnificent temple in their city, was made like the pattern of the Esagila in the heavens. Verse 17, an atonement cover in the NIV. In Hebrew, it's kapoet. KJV reads a mercy seat, and the JPS a cover. Sana comments here. This object is called in Hebrew kapoet, the word a word that has traditionally been rendered mercy seat in the English versions. This is based on the Septuagint and Vulgate translations, which mean an instrument of propitiation, and follow the usual sense of the Hebrew stem chaf pei resh, to atone or make expiation. This understanding would appear to be strengthened by the instruction in Leviticus 16, verses 15 to 16, that at this spot in the Holy of Holies, the high priest is to perform expiatory rites on the Day of Atonement. Nevertheless, mercy seat is not a satisfactory translation of kapoet, since the aspect of mercy is an interpretation and is not inherent in the word. The present translation in the JPS, a cover, rests on a supposed primary meaning to cover for the Hebrew verb chaf peiresh, as in Arabic kafara.
The concept of the mercy seat is something that's very, very voraciously adopted by evangelical Christians as this. It's something that features in a lot of worship music. The idea of, coming to the mercy seat to, because if you come to the presence of God, he will forgive you for being a dirty, filthy, disgusting sinner for existing the way he made you. So it's interesting to know that basically comes from a interpretive translation, shall we say, of the Ark. I mean, the Ark of the Covenant was obviously a huge focal point of all the religious ceremonies, and supposedly the presence of God, whether or not it was a statue of God, I don't know. I'll actually have to look at the arguments you pointed out for that, Lawrence.
Yeah, I'll actually take a look at the material again, but yeah, I'll come back hopefully on Wednesday with talking about that more.
Cool.
Remember to wipe down and disinfect the mercy seat when you're finished with it.
You're so bad.
That was exactly my interpretation of the mercy seat as well.
Well, I suppose that depends how long you've been looking for a seat.
18, cherubim. I don't know how you say that, but in the English at least. But in Hebrew, it's cherubim. Cheruvim. The etymology of cheruvim is not clear. Chazal in Talmud Sukkah 5b described the cherubim as having faces of children, since cheruvia in Babylonian Aramaic means like children. Ibn Ezra interpreted keruv to mean form, as seen in Ezekiel 28:14. Rashba, based on the same verse, writes that the cherubim were large fowls. According to Avishur, some scholars derive the word keruv from the Akkadian karabu, to bless, and from that karibu, one who blesses, which is also a name for the lamasu, a protective angel whose statues had the image of bulls with wings and human heads and were put near the entrances of the temples in Mesopotamia.
So interesting on that. So Alter notes that the Hebrew is derived, so cheruvim is derived from a root that suggests hybrid or composite, and perhaps also steed. So yeah, these are fearsome winged beasts. So the way, like the one you just noted, right? The Akkadian ones, yes. Right outside the gates, kind of guarding it, right? Those were composite creatures. And in the same way, this would be, I guess, similar to that. Not in look, but the fact that it's a composite.
There is a Jewish tradition that they were like bird shaped, but with children faces.
Gotcha. Okay.
So it's instead of Christian cherubs with just the angel wings, which are bird wings, we're going more bird, less child, but still.
Think like a griffin with a baby's face.
Yeah, the head of a child, but like the body is more, I don't know.
Yeah.
Swept back or whatever.
Yeah, that's the official one, yeah.
Okay, so we have bird bodies and children's faces, and these things are steeds. Did I hear that right?
That was another possible translation. But also it's interesting here that also noted is that in so he notes that these are fearsome winged beasts that figure in poetry as God's celestial steeds. Not entirely sure about that one, but and that here serve as his terrestrial throne, so enthroned upon the cherubim, being an epithet for the deity. And then he also goes back to, or this also goes back to Genesis 3:24, and he drove out the human and set up east of the Garden of Eden the cherubim and the flame of the whirling sword. It was that section. So
okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Laundra.
I wanted to note here that it's often a no-no to make a graven image, and I was looking at the Skeptics Annotated Bible, and so don't make a graven image, but make this graven image with cherubim of gold, and and carry it everywhere, and don't touch it because it'll kill you, right? And meaning the Ark of the Covenant.
Everywhere.
But carry it everywhere, and with the poles, don't take the poles out and whatever. But then in other parts of the Bible, like Exodus 20:24, thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath.
Well,
Or
that was
is
in
in the
Exodus
under
20.
earth.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Exodus 20, yes.
But
So
I
it's a
think you meant 20 verse
contradiction.
4. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Are these
it's a
graven if
contradiction.
they're hammered?
Oh.
Oh, well, then I can paint anything. Blasphemous art.
I think there's an idea that they made the lid as like a solid piece of gold, and then hammering it eventually made two bits that stick out that were resembling wings.
I would have expected them more likely to carve the figurines and then hammer the gold on top of them, just because otherwise, how are you ever gonna?
Well, that description is weird, but it probably not necessarily was there a real historical item that matched this exact description.
At some point during the Ark of the Covenant discussion, we're going to have to discuss that documentary where they thought that there was like a main Ark of the Covenant and then smaller Arks of the Covenant that you could take into battle that had some sort of explosives in them.
Oh, that's good. We should also talk about the one of the electric theory where it was actually a power plant, and that's why you couldn't wood protected you from getting shocked.
Yeah,
they actually called that one the mitochondria because it was the powerhouse of the cell.
I saw something in some comment on I think one of Aaron's video recently about the Ark is gold and wood and gold, and so it's an electrolyte and it's a big battery, but they forgot how to use it.
Yeah.
That's
that's how they make comment, right? Assembly of God says a question for Dr. Kip. In the Dead Sea Scrolls, is Zadok related to the Muslim Siddiq?
I doubt it.
What is that?
It's pretty late, so yeah. I mean, the root of that word Sedek just is pretty common, and I expect I don't know. I know very little Arabic, but as far as it's entirely possible that's a common root in Arabic as well. It usually just means righteousness or goodness.
Okay.
So yeah, I doubt it.
That is something the religious focus on.
So, Tomer.
Yeah.
Your commentary.
Verse 22. Yes. Verse 22. I like Rashi's commentary here. In another passage, however, it says, Leviticus 1:1, and God spake unto him out of the appointing tent, saying, that is that part of the tabernacle outside the partition veil, whilst the ark and the cover were on the other side of the veil. I think it's side of the veil. Consequently, we have two verses contradicting each other. But there comes a third verse and reconciles them in Numbers 7:89. And when Moses came into the appointed tent to speak with him, he heard the voice speaking unto him from off the covering, etc. This verse explains exactly what happened. Moses came into the tabernacle, and as soon as he had passed the entrance, a voice fell from heaven to the place on the cover which was between the cherubim. And from there it issued and was heard by Moses in the tent of meeting.
Oh, there's also something else interesting. There is another Jewish tradition, which is that maybe not in the tabernacle, but when it was in the temple, when the Israelites, the Jewish people, were misbehaving, the cherubim would turn around and face away from each other. That's how they knew they were bad. Which is interesting because it's like one solid piece of gold. So.
Okay, I'm done with my commentary for this.
And I remember seeing this thing when they sacked Londinium, or when the Romans had established the city of London as a Roman outpost, and the Iceni tribe, in collaboration with a number of other British tribes, raided and drove the Romans out. And it was like, I think, the first barbarian group that had ever done that. And one of the things that the Romans wrote about the way that they employed witches in the hillsides casting spells, and it caused the statues that were put there by the Romans to turn to change position so that they turn and flee.
Yeah.
Can't say I've heard of that.
This is
I'd
the
rather have
story
a
of
Molotov
Boudicca, right?
cocktail to throw than a spell.
Queen Boudicca of the Iceni.
Boudica.
Right.
Boudica. It's
Yeah.
Boudica.
Oh, is it Boudica?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
British and I pronounce
Yeah, I'm surprised you didn't know that.
Boudica. Okay.
Boudica.
Yeah. I mean, it is a Roman name for her, I guess. Anyway. So.
Yeah.
They don't actually know her actual name, but that's what the Romans called her. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Lilith, you can finish this chapter.
Oh, maybe before she does so, it's worth pointing out. I haven't read up on this in a while, but I do believe that much of the arc narrative, much of the stories about the arc itself, possibly is most commonly associated with the sanctuary at Shiloh, which it looks quite likely that this plays into some of the priestly politics that occurred during the proper historical period that we know of, the kingdom of Judah. Generally speaking, the Levites tend to be associated with the Shiloh sanctuary and with the cult of Yahweh that was there. The Bnei Acharon, the sons of Aaron, the so-called officiating priests, are the ones centered in the Jerusalem temple, which is more like a royal chapel attached to the ruling house, the house of David, and that at various points or some points within the construction of the biblical text, there is an amalgamation of these things in an effort to probably I don't want to say I guess conflate what are likely priestly polemics between these separate groups. And the sons of Aaron ended up kind of winning that fight in the end, although we see elements or pockets of these Levitical traditions kind of scattered throughout the biblical text.
What I notice in this is that, in an awful lot of what the Bible says up to this point, descriptions of things are just to say that they're vague is an understatement. Yeah. But when you come into the specifics about how to build this damn thing, how to build the Ark of the Covenant, how to make the tabernacle, we got to be very specific. All at once. For the first time, we're going to be specific about something.
Yeah, it's almost as if this was written for a different audience.
Almost. Yeah. I have to point out that in the documentary hypothesis, this is listed as a priestly source, which can mean either written during the exile to Babylon or after the exile to Babylon, immediately after, the return from Persia. I mean, there are different ways to look at this. Is it that when the people were exiled, someone went around and asked the old men and the priests and people who had seen what was going on in the temple cult, what exactly things looked like, and tried to write down somewhere as much as they could remember of their culture? Or did the God of 10,000 shining spheres and infinite universes come down to a mountain to specifically tell people how to fuse rings onto a special gold box that was magic?
Well,
the guy who can snap his fingers or blink or wiggle his nose or whatever he does to poof everything out of nothing in a moment with incredibly complex designs. Yeah, that he's always being attributed is the ability to do that. He can do all of those things. As I've said so many times, God can make planets and dinosaurs and anything that humans can't make, but he can't make anything humans can make. And he can't make a box or a boat or a book or a building. He needs people to do those things. And then they have to get very specific instructions on how to make these trivial items.
I think he's missing a opposable
He's afraid of iron, too.
It is kind of, afraid of iron. It is kind of a tough call because once we get to the end of the Deuteronomistic history, we will see that all the gold in the temple was destroyed. And after that moment, the ark is never mentioned again. So in my summation, it's pretty reasonable to see that the ark was just destroyed during the Babylonian invasion. And
they did burn the temple down. Like,
yeah. So like they destroyed everything in it. So
well, maybe they didn't keep the ark in the temple. Maybe somebody took it and maybe squirreled it away in Mar-a-Lago.
That or the Well of Souls, right?
You weren't allowed to touch it. If you removed it, the disaster would strike the people. So I imagine no one would have hidden it away, and they would have it would have been destroyed by the Babylonians.
Right.
When I picture this story in my mind, I see Moses and his brother and what's it? His two Aaron's sons. They're the only ones who can come up and talk to Moses while he's on this mountain. And everybody else, all the people are at the bottom of the mountain going, what's going on? And then when he finally comes down after 40 days, he says, I want you to give me gold. I want you to give me this, and then this. You know?
Yeah.
That's his plan, you know?
It's logic.
Don't look at the man behind the curtain, you know? This cloud descends.
Lalandra makes a good point here. It's very specific about how you're supposed to sacrifice, exactly what you're supposed to sacrifice and what amounts, and it has to be the best of your grain, and it has to be the best of your food or whatever, because now we're talking about providing for the priests. Anything that provides for the priests, the priesthood, that's very specific. All of it, everything the priests want, very specific. What God does, wide generalities.
But it's also contemporary with the writing would have been like how the Levites or the priests, how they controlled the temple, what was in it, what they did in it. All of these things would have been more recent in memory. So when they go and they try and give it an ancient origin and put it in the story of Moses, you see it goes from the vague to the very specific, and it.
Right. And I don't blame them for trying to remember parts of the temple cult that had been destroyed so that they could hopefully return to some of their traditional practices when they got back, which they did, some of them at least. That makes sense.
Keep in mind that most religious temples were in themselves essentially mini kingdoms. I mean, they had autonomy over most things minus whatever the rulers of that time might say. So gain all these offerings and food would be, well, yeah, you give it to the gods technically, but hey, don't want this nice piece of meat to go to waste. I'm a priestly person.
Yeah, it's
so
tribute.
Eat that as a tribute. Yeah, I mean, you look at these things logically, and you can see this literally all across the world in every single type of religion you can think of, where the priests are held up in this way by the people in this way with the idea behind piety as the source, but people are just giving things up for them to live really, really well in that time. When you think
we wouldn't complain about it so much if people didn't pretend that this was the only version of the exact same practice that came from magical origins, that was the one true God, yada, yada, yada. I'm like, no, it's just priests living off of people like always.
You can look at people like Kenneth Copeland living the way he does with his 3 private jets,
and Pat Robertson
evangelize more. He can only
Pat Robertson.
once. Yeah, yes.
May his name be forgotten.
Exactly.
What was the curse, Isaac? Say it for us in Hebrew.
Yes, please.
Yamach Shemo.
Yamach Shemo.
Preach it.
Yes.
I love it.
So do we know he was? Do we have any idea how super rich Pat Robertson was when he died?
Yeah, it's disgusting.
Horrific.
Was that from the diamond mine in Africa run by slave children, or was that from the religious grift?
The fact that's even a question.
Another thing, Dr. Kip brought up that there is a story about bringing the ark from Shiloh and bringing it to Jerusalem and stuff like that. So I wonder if this story also has like a political use, as in saying like, no, all of these vessels that came from different traditions were actually given by God in one place at one time.
Totally.
Retcons. Yeah, a lot of retcons.
For the Levite priesthood.
Yes, that could have been like a...
So Jeremiah is interesting to read in large part because he kind of reflects this this Levitical priestly tradition. and he's like the only prophet to ever even talk about Shiloh and the Ark. It's yeah.
It's funny, Jeremiah. So I think, if I'm remembering this properly, in Jeremiah, he says that he's the only, at least the only extant prophet. But I think he was contemporaneous to Ezekiel.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Is he?
Roughly, loosely, like Ezekiel's yeah, but pretty close. And they're actually very interesting to read, kind of side by side, one another, because they're saying totally different things.
They are. No, it's
about
the
the
thing
same
is,
stuff that's happening, right?
Oh,
yeah,
absolutely.
Ezekiel is such an interesting prophet to read because all of his stuff is so against like everything that we will read up to that point. Essentially, it's so interesting. He's like the black sheep of the prophets.
But it's interesting because you have two prophets possibly actually claiming to speak for different gods or claiming to speak for the same God, prophesying directly in opposition to each other explicitly. And then we have canonization in scripture where both are the inerrant word of God that is in every way true and accurate because reasons.
Okay, on that note, we're going to have to bring
Yes,
this
ma'am.
show to its close at some point. But I on the note that Lilith just brought up, this is the best way to read the Bible. I have the benefit of Lilith and Lorence and Kip. I have the benefit of all these people with expertise and background information. Isaac and Monty Chicken. I don't mean to I'm not excluding anybody. I'm just saying that I love that I have this opportunity. If I had just read the Bible by myself without any commentary from anybody else, without any of your background information, what other impressions would I have had? How could I have had a clue about any of this other information that Tomer keeps bringing up from all of these other scholars and so forth? This is just the best way to do this. I read the Quran the best way. Got a panel of Arabic speaking apostates and comparing all these different translations to the tafsirs and then having them explain to me where these traditional interpretations come from and so forth. This is the best way to read the Bible.
Yeah, this is where I kind of shudder at the idea of people just picking it up and reading it. Just read it from cover to cover.
It's very quiet.
And I mean, there's.
Well, how about this? What I hear from Christians. What I hear from Christians is that when you read the Bible, you have to read it in the Spirit. What's that mean? You have to believe that they've said it this way. You have to believe it before you read it.
Also, they say, let Scripture interpret Scripture.
Yeah.
And of course, that means that the specific theology that they have already been trained in and the theological interpretations and justifications that they are already familiar with should be self-evident to you.
Yeah.
And they're not going to be. And if they were, there wouldn't be, what are we at? 40,000 denominations of Christianity alone, or is that just Protestant Christianity? I can't remember.
40,
Which means you've already removed from the Catholics and the Orthodox and the Coptics and every gradient that broke off before that. So yeah, it's if it was simple and clear of interpretation, as they like to imagine that it is, nothing about religion in the world would be the way it is. It's just not a hypothesis that is in any way conducive with reality.
Yeah,
I saw a couple of comments that I didn't notice before. For one, where Dr. Kipp had commented, that's a new translation of the so-called priestly source. I don't know, there's like a different conversation going on in the.
I was just putting book links in there. Sorry.
Okay.
If
and then all right, then I'll skip those. And Zarnar and Carr says, a question: if the people who were loyal to God got killed for dropping the ark or looking in it, why didn't the people who destroyed it get killed on the spot before destroying it?
Oh, easy. So the idea that is essentially that is drowned out in the prophets and in the Deuteronomistic history is that the Babylonians are God's way of getting back at the Israelites. The Israelites had sinned, and their destruction is essentially like God had sent the Babylonians to punish them. essentially. And now it gets kind of weird because he also punished the Babylonians for destroying the Israelites. So it is really morally ambiguous. But
Didn't have to.
that
It's
Yeah.
also kind of a roundabout way of
that
doing
is
it.
the
don't you think?
explanation that's given in the Bible.
I think. Yeah, I think
It's
the
kind
idea
of
is
like-
that like
If you look at
God
God,
wanted
you
to
will
punish
surely
them.
die, but it's only because God decides that you're going to die because he's going to kill you.
It's I actually did a small TikTok about this after I read The Evolution of God. And it's interesting how, because a lot of this is really, it turns on the axis of the exile to Babylon and maintaining belief in Babylon and then returning under Persia. That changed the way that they saw God, because gods at that time were still quite regional. You were only under the auspices of a god while you were in their territory, as it were.
Mhm.
So how can we sing the songs of Yahweh in a foreign land? Makes sense in that world. But then instead of accepting the loss and the logical consequences of that loss in that worldview, which was that your God lost and wasn't powerful enough to protect you or whatever, they came up with a different justification, that God was more powerful than they thought. And it was all part of the plan. And they just had to be faithful and wait and have faith and continue, because God is playing 5D chess here, people. There is way more going on than you see. You have to keep the faith. And it just, it sounds familiar.
I just want to
But
remind
with-
that we still haven't finished this chapter. So
We haven't finished the chapter.
Well, we
No,
have.
we
You're
didn't
right. I
do
have
the
to
la-
read the
the
table of the
lampstand?
lampstand. I'll do it. I'll go.
Go for
Yeah.
it.
and I have one page of commentary for this. So
Okay.
Oh my word.
So-
Okay, let's dive in.
We're building furniture for God now, people.
And we're building and we're building.
This is why he was like Jesus was a carpenter, right?
Yeah, he had to fix it.
Yeah.
But there's also the table.
Now, make
there
a
was one
table.
thing.
Oh, sorry.
I just want to say there was one thing where your translation said that the poles were fixed to the feet of the ark.
Oh no, they were the rings were to fix to the feet
were
of the
attached to
ark,
the feet.
and then the pole went through the rings so that it hypothetically could be removed, but was not to be removed.
Okay, because I think I guess there's an argument about whether the ark had legs or not, and it just means rings were attached
Right.
to the
I mean,
corners,
presumably
not
it would have had something to part that it stood on, but that's
Maybe.
yeah. Anyway, right. The table, verse. Okay, Exodus 25, verse 23. Make a table of acacia wood, 2 cubits long, a cubit wide, and a cubit and a half high. Overlay it with pure gold, and make a gold molding around it. Also, make around a rim a handbreadth wide, and put a gold molding on the rim. Make 4 gold rings for the table and fasten them to the 4 corners where the 4 legs are. The rings are to be close to the rim and hold the poles used in carrying the table. Make the poles of acacia wood, overlay them with gold, and carry the table with them. And make its plates and dishes of pure gold, as well as its pitchers and bowls for the pouring out of the offerings. Put the bread of the presence on this table to be before me at all times. Make a lampstand of pure gold and hammer it out base and shaft. Its flower-like cups, buds, and blossoms shall be of one piece with it. 6 branches are to extend from the sides of the lampstand, 3 on one side and 3 on the other. 3 cups shaped like almond flowers with buds and blossoms are to be on one branch, 3 on the next branch. The same for all 6 branches extending from the lampstand.
But don't make
And
a
on-
rendering of anything that is under the heavens and the earth.
Oh, of course not. But this is it not on the heavens or the earth because reasons. And on the lampstand there are on the lampstand there are to be 4 cups shaped like almond flowers, buds, 6 branches in all. The buds and branches shall all be of one piece with the lampstand hammered out of pure gold. Then make it 7 lamps and set them upon it so that they light the space in front of it. Its wick trimmers and trays are to be of pure gold. A talent of pure gold is to be used for the lampstand, and all these accessories. See that you make them according to the pattern shown you on the mountain.
And we're going to need a second shrubbery. Just slightly higher than the first one, with a path running through the middle to create a 2-level
And
effect.
Discovery.
you must cut down the tallest tree in the forest with a herring.
Okay.
Now, see,
From
I'm an American here, and we struggle even with the metric system. So, how many bananas can you fit in a cubit? How big is a cubit?
I thought it was supposed to be up the length
it's
of
supposed to be about a forearm, yeah.
30
A
centimeters?
Yeah, it's
forearm.
elbow. It's fingertip to
bananas?
elbow,
Yeah.
extended fingertip to elbow. But it's the thing is, it's not measured off of me. It's measured off of people that are maybe a foot shorter than me.
It's about roughly 1.25 to 1.5 feet in between there. There's like a measurement gauge.
It's kind of like
And,
the way my grandmother used to measure time that way. Everything would be in a jiffy or a while or after a spell.
or 2 shakes of a lamb's tail.
Or as the crow flies.
And I think when it says a hand breadth, that's like kind of like this like if you were to make a thumbs up.
Mhm.
Yeah, but which is different
be about
than a
this
span,
distance.
because a span is
Yes,
from the
a
tip of the
span
pinky to
is-
the tip.
Yeah. So a hand, I think there's 4 hand breadths to a cubit, and
I have to
2 hand
wonder at-
breadths to a span, and 2 spans to a cubit.
Yeah,
The
very
weight of a
weird, right?
talent of gold, because a talent of gold is to make not only this to point out 6 branches to this lampstand with 3 buds for candles holders on each branch, and then
Good.
also make
Decorators.
7 lamps and wick trimmers, trays, all of that. A talent of pure gold is to make all of that. So how much is a talent of gold? Are we talking like compare this to one of those bricks of gold we all imagine are in
Wait,
Fort
a
Knox?
talent of gold? Isn't that pure gold?
Yes.
Oh no, sorry, it's
A
a
common kikar was 60
kikal.
manas.
Yeah, kikal. Sorry.
That used for sacred purpose. The one that was used for sacred purposes was double as much, so 120 mana. A
72
mana was
pounds,
equal
33
to a
kilograms.
which is
roughly.
a Roman pound, a libra a pound, by which silver is weighed. This is equivalent to. It doesn't give me the modern identical idea, but if it's a pound, then it's 120 pounds.
So it could be
Oh.
up to 120 pounds, but they say it could be as low as 76 pounds. So it's
Okay, wow.
range. Yeah,
Yeah, it's not a lot.
Quite a range.
yeah.
That's
But I remember that this
It's
candelabra
super
wasn't that tall. It
accurate,
was only
guys.
10 hand breadths tall, I think.
It's hyper accurate for clarity purposes. I hope you understand.
Mm,
Yeah.
yes.
And not
Yeah, like
because
full
the
people.
priests are no longer bullshitting about what God does, but because they're talking about what they want.
Mm-hmm.
And for whatever reason, how they were supposed to build this thing, we're supposed to believe, however many centuries ago that was supposed to be, that ended up in the eternal word for all people of all time.
It's like
Little
silver
confused.
bulletin, bro.
Yeah, and you remember, it's also got rings, just like the Ark of the Covenant, for the
I'm just
wolves to
thinking-
go through, because they're going to move around the desert for a while, although they don't know it's going to be that long yet.
I'm just thinking, if I realize, the Lord works in delirious ways, but if I'm God and I want to produce one book, I don't know why. If I'm God, and I'm going to speak in books, why would it not be a library? Why would it not be a constantly updating thing? Why would I not be in continuous interaction? Why would I not have a regular feed that constantly splays out my word forever?
God's Twitter feed.
Exactly.
It
Well,
does have
there's
one.
a
It's not
constant
bad.
stream of information, and that would
And
be.
Satan.
But no, if you're going to write one book, one teeny little book, and this is God's word to all people of all time, why does it not mention microorganisms or the reason why we want to wash our hands and sterilize food? I mean, why does it not give anything about disease prevention, any kind of information we could actually use? Why does it not describe, a periodic table? Why does it give none of that?
It's because
But it
Please,
includes
like mutton.
this.
they didn't know anything about this. It's just the education of the time. They didn't.
I
have
know
it.
that they didn't. God would, if God was real, God would know this. If God was real and this was his word, it would be entirely different than it is. The Bible is like this and includes this because it's not God's word. That's my point. This is the word of the priests who want you to build him a tabernacle and an ark and make sure. And let's talk about in the next chapter how all the raiment that we're going to give Aaron. Right? We're gonna ignore in a
That's
few
in
chapters
28,
how,
I think, or 29.
yeah, we're going to ignore in a few chapters how Aaron was supposed to be killed. God said, "Kill every man and his brother," but then we don't kill that guy, right? And suddenly he becomes a priest, and suddenly we have to make his fucking clothes.
Well, to be
and it's
clear,
very
the whole killing thing, that was like people in opposition to Moses that should have been killed.
Which included his own brother, who was the one who made the calf. But we'll get there.
That's where the Levites earned the priesthood, not through nepotism, but through genocide. So, gotta love that. Love that for God. But I'm hopeful, Isaac, if you're able to find some of those images for next time, 23 or 26 when we're looking at the tabernacle.
I just shared an image of the candelabra, which is good because there's all that talk of like pedals and knobs and cups and stuff.
Yeah, Peter, can you put that up?
That would be awesome.
So this is what they're talking about.
I mean, for us, it's going to be very small on the screen, so maybe just click on the link in your own.
Well, for us, it will be, but Peter can sort it.
Yeah.
So where it'll go full screen for everybody else.
You're sure that would have been Herod's menorah, right?
Sorry?
Is this Herod's
menorah? Yeah, I mean, it's based on this description. I mean, and this description probably wasn't based on the one that was like the Romans took, but the one that they built probably.
Yeah, I remember. I don't know if this was. Sorry for interrupting, but I don't know if there was son or prop. But they said that the descriptions of the menorah from like Roman periods they're not accurate to the original menorah, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, they probably wouldn't have been.
Yeah, imagine that they based the people that wrote this were basing it on the design that was in the first temple, let's say. Yeah. And then the people who made the second temple version, they would have used this description that we're reading now to figure out how to make it. So it's possible that those two are quite different looking. And I think there's also idea that if it's not made of gold, then it doesn't have to follow all these rules. It just has to have seven branches. And I think like after the the Hasmonean revolt, they made the candelabra out of zinc, possibly. I think that's the words. And it was literally just a wooden base with holes in it and like 7 shafts sticking out, and that was it.
But isn't it interesting that this sculpture, God is apparently, I don't know, Jewish. He's like, these are his favorite people, so everything is going to be in line with their culture. He's not going to have a Chinese style of anything, not the type of materials that they use, nor the type of paintings. It's not going to have Nordic art. It's not going to have Nordic animal knotwork on it. It's always going to be the Hebrew tradition or the Jewish tradition. The culture that produced this God is exactly what it's going to be.
Yeah, why didn't you hear about Asians or South Americans or Native Americans, for example, in the Bible? Makes you wonder.
Yeah, there's not. Oh, by the way, just imagine, you can have the Ark of the Covenant because it's for all people of all time. We're going to carve animal totems out of wood. And
why does God only talk to people who haven't figured out math yet?
By the way, that image. That image that we shared just now, the one with the photo of the sculpture, that was created by a group of like ultra religious Jewish people who believe that the Messiah is going to come very soon, so we need to be ready. So we're going to get the temple. It's going to they've already like collected money and they've made these I guess replicas, but I think they're not intending them to be replicas. They're intending them to be used in the third temple. So it's possible that this golden menorah in the photo is actually made of pure gold. And maybe not this one. Maybe they have another one somewhere, but this one's on display like in the city. You can walk past it.
That's a lot of gold.
Quite near the Western Wall.
I just want to interject that I'm still waiting for my commentary.
Oh yeah.
Oh, my word.
Do that then. No problem.
This is how it works here.
All right. If you insist.
No, I just know you. I'm sorry again because I
send you like a
want you-
box of cookies or something.
Yeah, I just didn't want to delay it
Yeah.
too much. So
Oh right. Yes.
I see. Aaron, do you want to read the comments or do you want me to start?
Let me jump on those comments. All right, so we have
Just one, no?
Juju
no.
Dude offers £5 and says you have to buy it before you see it. Yeah, that's kind of like that. That's correct. Then Zarnar and Kar says, "Is there a drawing of what the ark would have looked like? Would be interesting to see what it looked like since it's in the descriptions of what they were supposed to make." Yes, I've seen a number of illustrations for what this thing is. Matter of fact, it was even in the movie.
Yes.
It was even in the movie.
Yes.
They showed, and I don't mean the ark was in the movie. I mean there's an old drawing that is referred to that is actually an old drawing of it. That there are plenty of people have depicted what this thing should look like according to these descriptions.
Oh God. Okay, I'm having terrible time trying to get this, but this is it's the same animated Bible that I had as a child, and unfortunately I can't really zoom in there. But it had an image of the ark, at least the Christian understanding of what it would look like.
I'll just plonk it in the. Here, there's an image I got.
There we go.
Use that. There's a nice black and white drawing from like the 1800s or something.
Aaron, you didn't know that the FBI has the ark now?
Probably a good one in here.
I'm sorry, what?
Didn't you know that the FBI has the ark now? They did a new edit of what was it? The movie
Raiders of the Lost Ark?
Yeah, Raiders of the Lost Ark with an edit.
It's not that the FBI has it though. The video that I saw, it was in Mar-a-Lago.
Yes.
Yeah.
In the bathroom.
God, it's being used as his toilet. Oh God. Oh.
Maybe there's a better photo.
Oh.
Do we have? I don't want to move to the next comment until we've seen this image. Peter, do we have the image?
Peter, I did post another one. And I think this one's very nice as well. It's a bit of a painting.
I'm pretty sure
either of those links.
The one that
go ahead and read this comment. Well, Paul,
the Lego one.
The one that you posted wasn't a JPEG, so I can't pull that up in OBS.
Both of them are JPEGs.
Yeah, well, it looks like Kip's got all the pictures. It's just
he's got the Lego
He's got
Bible.
him in that. Yeah, he's got him in the 20th century hard copy.
Peter, are these links not working for you?
I need to get that because I definitely have to get that Bible.
I love the brick Bible.
It's my favorite.
Just think how quickly this religion would have died if somebody could find an original Bible dated 2,000 years ago or whatever. They can find the original thing, and it was illustrated.
Yeah, it does. Both of them don't download as JPEG. They download as WebP and AVIF files. And
okay, well,
neither of those.
Enough of that. Old men wrestling with technology. Yeah. Eyeshadow Z40 offers $5 and says, "Aaron, you should ask Christians what teaching of Jesus do they follow when they say that is the Old Testament, because they don't follow any." That's correct.
Oh, they hate the gays. That's always.
Peter, if you want, you could just share them in the regular comments, maybe as a link for people to click on if they want.
Yeah.
Okay, now I'll start my commentary. It's just one page, so I'm not going to delay.
Okay.
Verse. Oh boy, we're all excited. Verse 23. Table. Sana comments: the main function of the table was to accommodate the bread of display. Hence, it is called the table of display, Shulchan HaPanim, in Numbers 4:7. Another name found in 2 Chronicles 29:18 is the table of the row in close brackets of bread, or in Hebrew, Shulchan HaMa'arechet. Still a third designation, the pure table, HaShulchan HaTahor, is used in Leviticus 24:6. This last refers either to the plating of pure gold, or it means that the rows of bread be placed on the table proper and not on the side attachments. Verse 29, and make its place. I had to include, the Chacham makes an interesting claim here. He writes, an ordering statement, make the plates of the table. This statement hints that it was obvious, or famously known, that the table has plates. This is one of the writings that prove that not all of the details of making the tabernacle and its tools were written in the Torah, but only headlines, and the explanations of the details were told to Moses and Israel in the oral Torah.
Of course.
Oh, there we go.
That's a good boy.
Okay. Verse 30. Bread of presence. In Hebrew, lechem panim. KJV translates shoe bread, and JPS bread of display. The word panim,
Showbread.
it's shoe. It's SHEW, but is it pronounced show?
Oh, I don't know. I
SHEW.
think it's supposed to be show.
SHEW. That's how it is spelled
okay,
in KJV.
maybe.
Shoe bread.
Shoe.
Yeah. The word panim could be interpreted as surfaces, like Rashi and the Mishnah Melechot 11:4 suggest. Interior, as Targum Pseudo Jonathan renders it. Some suggested to derive it from lefanim, meaning before. Rashbam, for example, interpreted lechem panim, bread fit to display before kings. Ibn Ezra interpreted bread displayed before God. This bread is also called the regular bread, lechem hatamid, in Numbers 4:7, the arrangement bread, lechem hamarechet, in Nehemiah 10:34 and 1 Chronicles 9:32, and the holiness bread, lechem hakodesh, in 1 Samuel 21:5. Leviticus 25 verses 5-9 describe the bread of display in more detail. And the lampstand in 31, in Hebrew, menorah. You've already explained a lot about, but I'll put my comment here. From the stem nun vav resh, to light. Rashbam comments that the lampstand was used to lighten the table. This is supported by verse 37, Exodus 27, verses 20-21, 35, chapter 25, verse 14, and 39, verse 37. Rashi, based on Tanchuma Beha'alotecha 3, comments that the lamp was made by itself. He writes, because Moses was puzzled by it, i.e. the work of the candlestick, the Holy One, blessed be he, said to him, cast the talent of gold into fire, and it will be made of itself. For this reason, it does not say ta'aseh, thou shalt make.
There are lots of claims like that, as like we'll get to with the golden calf, where it's like, I just put the gold in the fire and it just turned out like this. I don't know what happened. And you're like, yeah, sure. Very, very probable, much real, very believe.
Such wow.
Okay, that's it for my commentary on this.
That's a
Final
picture
word.
of the table.
We did it! Woohoo! What is that?
That was a picture of the table with the showbread on it.
Yes.
Showbread.
Yeah, there'll be more involved in the law later about the showbread that's
the shape
sacred
of
and
the
set.
breads.
Yeah, sacred and set apart to God. But there's a big deal when David comes and eats some of it, which it's not lawful for him to do, take some from the priests. And then Jesus makes an object lesson of it. So we'll be coming back to that at certain points.
Tomer, have you finished your commentary?
Yes, I'm done.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, we went a little over, not much though, and I appreciate it. And I'm really what?
You have one comment left.
One more.
Oh, another one. Okay. Von Reck, $25. Thank you. And says thank you. Aaron, in your collection of associates, all the time you all spend enlightening us to the follies of this book. That is an experience that I'm having. If I had just read this through myself, I wouldn't have known any of the stuff that everybody else is contributing this. So that if I'm benefiting from this, I'm hoping that other people are too. It's been a good time for me.
There's so many.
So thank you, my assembled team.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, and I think we can close up. Anybody got any final thing to say? Say it quick.
Make sure to catch Atheist Sunday School tomorrow.
Yes. Watch Atheist Sunday School and watch
the link is below.
Joseph Smith, if you get a chance. Happy Pride to everyone, and happy demise.
Because what does pride spell? Pat Robertson is dead, everybody.
I love it. Mwah, mwah, love it. And I know this part of the Bible is considered somewhat boring for a lot of people.
Worry.
And some of this we are going to, I hope, push through at a little bit of a faster pace.
No, you won't.
But, well, okay, faster than some of the previous, definitely faster than we covered the slavery stuff. But
yeah.
But yeah, I think there are still things to be learned from there, and I'm going to, do what I can to bring out points where there is some connection to something else going on besides just priest want lots of barbecue and big shiny gold thing.
Well,
and they do. And Dr. Kip, thank you very much for finding time to join us today.
Yes.
It's a pleasure to meet you, Dr. Kip.
Pleasure to have you on.
Thank you, Dr. Kip, for this. Yeah, sure. Thank you.
All right, Peter, take us out.